liberty and justice for all.
Moment of silence. Thank you.
Should we do it over?
Next, we have the adoption of the agenda. I do have one item that I'd like to add to F4, which we had talked in a previous meeting when we approved an additional one or two members of the Department of Social Services local board appointees. Just for discussion's sake, I would like to add that to the agenda.
Madam Chair, with that addition, I move that we adopt the agenda.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Moves us into presentations. Dr. Grimsley, School Board Report.
Good afternoon. Ms. Chairwoman, members of the board, I trust you've had a good summer and hopefully found the necessary time to enjoy vacation and some time with your family. Self-care is so very important with so many pressing challenges in front of you, and we so appreciate your service to the communities and families, the community and the families and students of Rappahannock County. I will keep my report brief as I have brought a special guest as part of my time with you. We are only 1 week from the start of school. Oh my goodness, the shortest summer ever. The RCPS administration has been working tirelessly over the summer to prepare for what is shaping up to be the greatest year ever. Just earlier today, we welcomed new staff to the district. In fact, 18 new instructional staff joined us for our first day of new teacher orientation. I am so proud of our human resources staff who work diligently in their outreach to recruit new teachers and staff for vacant positions. Many of our new hires commented that they were excited to come to Rappahannock, having witnessed and heard about the many successes of the district throughout the pandemic. So thank you so much, members of this body, who played a substantial role in supporting your local school system throughout such a challenging time. Thank you so much for your part in this. The graciousness and collaboration has not gone unnoticed by professionals in the field, and it's largely to thank for bringing so many new recruits on board in such little time. So thank you. Our Convocation Day is this Wednesday, August 4th, when we welcome all staff back for our 21-22 school year. We have learned so much about the needs of our students and families throughout this pandemic and have much work to do. Over the coming months, we will be revamping our comprehensive plan, as well as adapting our pandemic response model to align with the identified academic and social-emotional needs of our students. I am very pleased to inform you that our Wellness Center project is moving forward for a start of school launch, with Valley Health having signed on as our telehealth provider, allowing access to high-quality pediatric care for students 5 days a week. Additionally, we will continue with our agreement with Health Connect America, providing outpatient, emotional, and behavioral therapeutic services for referred students. This model for integrated care is a first of its kind and is generously funded by the PATH Foundation. Parents who choose to access these services may use their private insurance or Medicaid, or in some cases, heavily discounted copays in order to access this care. We look forward to measuring the impacts this will have on the overall wellness of our student body, as well as the issue of chronic absenteeism, which is now strongly linked to our accreditation. Our athletic director, Courtney Atkins, has been working on developing a schedule for athletics this year, which so far are slated to move on as normal. We will keep the community updated on new restrictions that may develop as we start the school year. Meet the Teacher Day is August 9th from 1 to 4 and then 5 to 7, with 8th grade orientation that same evening from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. We eagerly await our students' return on August 11th for the first day of school. The school board will hold a special called meeting this week on Wednesday, August 4th at 6 p.m. in the elementary school gym to review recently released guidance and determine if any changes need to be made from our health and safety plan, particularly our mask policy. Currently, we are strongly encouraging unvaccinated individuals to wear masks on school property, but it is not required at this time. So before I introduce my special guest, I will pause if you have any questions for me.
Dr. Grimsley, I crossed paths over the weekend with one of your new hires, and to your point, she's very excited about starting. I think today is her first day. She's a teacher's aide. Her question to me, and I just wanted to see if you could help me understand what she was explaining to me. She said that starting today, August 2nd, she had been told that she would not receive her first paycheck until the middle of September. I wonder, one, if that's accurate, and two, why would a new hire wait that long?
Yeah, usually, and this is a payroll process that was picked up in our systems just this past year, and that's true. We used to start a lot later in August, so the first pay run would have to go through an entire cycle, so new hires wouldn't be paid sometimes until the mid-September. So we have recently changed that. So now that we start so early and have new teachers starting, new staff will receive their first paycheck on August 15th.
Great, good news. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Thank you very much.
All right, so without further ado, it is my pleasure to formally introduce you to Mr. Carlos Seward, the new principal of Rchs. Mr. Seward comes to us from Eastern View High School in Culpeper, where he served as assistant principal for 4 years. He began his career in Virginia Beach and quickly became a leader among his peers, serving as the social studies department chair and curriculum leader. Over his tenure as an educational administrator, he has served as the International Baccalaureate Middle Years Program Coordinator, Advanced Placement via Individual Determination Coordinator, and Dean of Students in Alexandria City Public Schools. Prior to this, he served as a middle school social studies teacher and grade level chairperson in Henrico County Public Schools. Mr. Seward?
Madam Chairwoman, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the Board of Supervisors, to our County Administrator, Mr. Curry, to our County Commonwealth Attorney, Mr. Goff, everyone in attendance, thank you. Thank you for the extremely warm welcome that I've received here in Rappahannock County. I spoke with Mr. Curry before the meeting started formally and shared with him that we have something in common. We're both two guys that used to live in coastal Virginia who have now found and are making Rappahannock home. There are 3 reasons why I decided to apply for the job, and I'm blessed to have this job. The first reason, quite honestly, was Dr. Grimsley. The past 4 years, sitting across the county line, I've been able to watch her innovative leadership, and I've always wanted to work for someone that will push me and inspire me and motivate me. So that's a really good fit. The second reason why I applied is this community. This community, I've known people who have lived here, worked here, played here, and I want to be a part of it in some way, somehow. And the third reason is a bit innocuous, but I want to share it with you. People like me notice other people, and I notice how supportive our school board and how generous the Board of Supervisors has been in funding our schools, and with anything that we've asked you to do, you've done it for us without hesitation or reservation. So, County Administrator, I thank you for that. Board of Supervisors, I thank you for that. This school year, we're looking forward to continuing with our Health Sciences Academy. I just spoke with Michelle Fincham, who is the director of our Agricultural Sciences Academy. We're going to be welcoming back 300 plus students to our campus in just a week from Wednesday. So I'm really excited to be here. Thank you. You're always welcome to Lee Highway, where our school is. And if there's anything I can do for you, let me know. I'm here to serve and support our students and this board. Any questions?
Welcome.
Sorry, I was talking to that.
That's
No.
okay, enthusiasm is getting
Thank you.
No, thanks.
Next, we go into the employee recognition part of the agenda, and Mr. Curry's going to help me because we have a lot of people to recognize.
Thank you. We try to recognize long tenured staff annually, and do that after the end of the fiscal year when we try to mark that. We'll roll these out at a increasing seniority level. Captain Jim Jones has been with us for 5 years. It's this last fiscal year. So I met Captain Jones very shortly after coming to work. He would wander down the sidewalk and come into the red building, which I'm very glad not to be there. We get to work with each other every now and again, but thank you, Jim, for everything. and that Captain Jones was 5 years. 10 years, we have Lieutenant Cody Dawson. I didn't realize this. I took a high school tour not too long ago and saw Lieutenant Dodson's photo up on the wall in, I think, the shop class. It is great when you can see somebody make that transition from a local high school kid to our lieutenant on the roads. Thank you for everything, Tim.
CPR instructor as well.
I don't see Amanda Weekly with us. She's our library director. Also 10 years for Amanda. Lisa Dawson in the treasurer's office, 15 years. Well, sometimes we're not good at math, I don't know. 15 years, it's hard for me to even comprehend that 15 years, having been here only 3.5, 15 years there. You've gone through treasurers in a big transition. I appreciate it. I know I work closely with your office and you guys are fantastic. Thank you for all your support. This gentleman, sometimes we don't always see eye to eye, but most of the time we do, Mr. Frazier.
I was looking around trying to figure out who that was.
I think it's 26 years, but as of the fiscal year, it's 25 years. I'm really grateful to be able to say that after November, you will be the only board member that's still on the board that hired me, so I really do like you a lot. The sheriff's office cleaning up, Major Jenkins, 25 years as well. It's that calm, steady hand on the rudder over in the sheriff's office. Sheriff can go do all the exciting things for the public, but we know that Major is in the office getting it done when it needs to get done. Thank you, sir. And when we started these awards back up after a couple-year hiatus, we gave a special award to Peggy Ralph because she had missed one, and it was her 37th year. But now that she's made her 40th year, we thought we might as well get her back on cycle. So, Peggy,
You don't have to.
thank you very much. We gave you the extra special pin last time, so we had to find an extra special pin. So, thank you for 40 years of service to the community.
I do believe we have representatives from all three here on Zoom.
Yes, let me do that. You can go ahead and unmute.
Hi there, this is Scott Teenage. I will apologize in advance for not being there in person this time around. Perhaps my confusion, for some reason, I was thinking that these meetings were held on Wednesdays and not Mondays. And unfortunately, in the month of August, I have a conflict on Mondays. But depending on how things are progressing, if there's a request for next month, I'm sure I can likely be there if that is necessary. That aside, we talked about current status of where we're at with the system. And when I was there last time, there was a lot of discussion around some of the paging concerns that we were having. And there were certain things that I was unaware of, as well as from a status perspective. And so I sort of dug into that after I left the meeting with our teams and whatnot. And although it took us a few additional weeks after that, we do believe we found the root cause of a lot of the paging issues that we were seeing in the county, and it had a result of a configuration issue at one of the sites, and that was resolved. We did some additional optimization, and everything I'm hearing at this point, at least on the internal calls, is we believe that there's been some improvement. Now, there is a greater or a broader call tomorrow with different other entities from the surrounding communities and whatnot, where we'll kind of dig into a little bit more. But I believe that we were finally able to, determine what the root cause of that issue was, get it corrected, and we should be seeing some improved performance for sure within the county. And Gary, I'm not sure, I know you were on, I believe you were on vacation, so I'm not sure what you've heard feedback wise, so I open that up to you or anyone else on the board to provide any insight that perhaps you're hearing from the local users.
Well, I would say right now we're cautiously optimistic, but we have plenty of users in the field who will not hesitate to let us know if the paging system isn't meeting our expectations. We do know that we have some coverage issues and that we may need to expand the system, but as soon as we have some confidence that the system is working to its designed intent, it's easy for us to transition to that next stage.
Good Madam Chair.
Yes.
I was, Ron Fraser, represent the area where Company 3 Amosville is, and I was notified both yesterday and today that the pagers still don't work as close as 3 miles away from the fire department. And there was a radio malfunction yesterday afternoon right there about the same distance, 2 miles or so from the tower. So we still have plenty of problems. I don't know what you've worked on, but no one's telling me that they've been.
Yeah, I think the radio, I
Well,
would say I heard a call where there was a radio reset. That was an 800 megahertz radio, and that is something that needs to be tracked down and will be discussed. I'm sure a ticket has been put in by Amosville BFR, but regarding the VHF paging, I'll let Mr. Tanchman respond.
No, I was just saying, what would be helpful for us in a situation like this is when, if there's still some issues that have been seen that, we basically get the time of day, we get the location, and obviously the day and the issue that was being seen. To the point, we know that there's not, and I stated this last time, there's not 100% coverage throughout the county, but that's not to say that, the issue that's being discussed right now isn't in an area that should be covered, and that's what I don't know, right? So, obviously we have our coverage maps, we can look at those, we can kind of pinpoint back to whatever it was that the individual was having issues with, but we really just need all the additional detail, again, around the time of day, the location, and what the issue was, and then we can kind of take a look at that and see what we think the problem might have been.
Madam Chair, if I could, this is Keir Whitson representing the Hampton Voting District. Last time you were here, just to help my understanding and the public's understanding of what we're facing, I had asked for you to come back with an itemized list of discrete problems and then provide the status of each in terms of mitigating whatever problem exists and then setting a timeline for resolving each item. It sounds like you're feeling more confident about the paging side of things, but just following that approach to informing us of where we stand, what is left and what are you working on actively, and when will everything be at a point of reliability where we don't need to talk about this anymore?
Well, I think the other major issue that we've been working on has to do with the UPS reliability. And on, I want to say it's August 6th, we've expected to get upgraded firmware from Eaton, our UPS provider, and we plan on testing that out, installing it, and that should bring the increased stability and reliability that should be expected, not just by the county but by us as well, and holding our partner responsible for making sure they're meeting their level agreement to us and we are meeting it to the county. Those are two of the major issues that I know. I think there's some smaller issues, and unfortunately, I wanted to review that with some of the key stakeholders that we deal with in the county on a daily basis. and we were not able to do that as I had hoped. And I wanted to, because basically I don't want to miss something, and I don't want to bring up something that perhaps is not really that big of a deal. From my perspective, I felt that the UPS and paging issues were predominantly the issues that were keeping us from, really moving forward. And, to the point that I know there's some additional coverage issues within the county, unrelated to the current scope. I know we're looking at perhaps adding another site to kind of or to help correct that as well.
And I'll just add the color commentary that the UPS issue is linked to the May 26th event, that outage we had there.
So it sounds like we'll be talking again, and I would say, just for clear understanding of where we are in resolving various ongoing issues, definitely a list of what you're working on and how long it's going to take to resolve them. But I do appreciate the progress report here, and it sounds like we're headed in the right direction on the paging system. So thank you for that.
Have you heard anything from Chester Cap?
I have not. And as Mr. Henchman noted, they tried to organize a meeting last week, and it didn't really work out with my schedule and Mr. Polster's schedule, so we weren't able to have a one-on-one. Our routine weekly regional meeting is tomorrow morning.
I heard from some of the parties, some of the stations, Madam Chairman, if I may, that in fact there were some issues with work that was done by contractors in terms of how the installations were handled, and that you all were taking a complete time to do a complete review of all the systems. Is that correct?
Well, L3 Harris went around and checked the grounding and bonding at all the sites to make sure what was designed and recommended was put in. There was some discussion regarding the antenna installation for the site radio at Chester Gap
That's
that
what I
I know
was-
is currently being reviewed.
Okay.
Mr. Polster's riding that one.
Sounds good.
Well, thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to the day we don't need updates.
I look forward to the next meeting being everything has been resolved to the county's satisfaction. So at least that's the goal that will be set on our side.
That was a September meeting?
Yes, and if you could help me out.
Which is actually Wednesday, the Wednesday, September 1st, owing to Labor Day being the next Monday.
Wednesday, September 1st. Okay, that's what I was going to ask. Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have the quarterly VDOT update and the Route 211 study. Mr. Nesbitt.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman and members of the board, and really appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's been a little while, I guess, since I've been here, but been with you virtually, if not in person. Things are going, we're in the middle of, obviously, summer maintenance activities. We are mowing, we're maintaining gravel roads, we're responding to storm damage complaints. We're doing our normal summer activities. I got a question on the way in here, when are you going to mow 211 again? And for our contractor is supposed to start next week. I'm not sure what end, but I know they're going to start next week. So and then there'll be one more. That'll be their second cycle. There'll be a final cycle in October, November timeframe before the first frost. You have our monthly report, I believe. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it, but a couple of the high points are that we did complete just recently the hard surfacing of South Post Road. So that is a secondary 6-year plan project that was been on our list for quite a while. So we're able to get that finished and just right across it on the way up here. And, it looked good, and we'll continue to monitor it. And, sometimes things happen and we have to do some tweaking, but we'll continue to monitor that. And our next thing that we're going to do is start design on Cairo Run Road, which is the next road, 614, the next road that we're going to start. That will be in the queue for rural rustic And the construction will be in the summer of 2023. We just don't, the funding's not gonna work out to do it next year, so it's gonna be another year out before we can work on that one. There's some, other various, on-call type contracts that are going on. I believe they just finished up the surface treatment schedule for the year up here in Rappahannock. We did, I think, about 6 routes. And I haven't heard of any issues or complaints on those routes. Sometimes there's some excess loose stone, and we'll come back and sweep that up or vacuum it up or whatever we need to do. But I haven't heard anything on those, so hopefully that'll be fine. And as far as, and we're still working on getting Route 231 and 522 intersection reconfigured, and we look to do that in later this summer or September timeframe. And we're also scheduled to start next week on a project that we're partnering with Piedmont Environmental Council to, there's 2 locations that we're going to try to make more trout friendly. One of them is Route 631 over Bolton's Branch, which is a dead-end gravel road, but the Bolton's Branch is a pretty significant trout stream, and there's been a lot of work done on private property. And so we're going to kind of fill in a gap there with some work over there. There's a concrete slab, if anybody's familiar with that road, that we're going to replace the culvert and replace the concrete slab. We're going to put larger culverts and countersink them and try to create as much of a natural bottom there as we can. And the same thing at Sycamore Ridge Road 653 over Piney River, which will be next summer. They're designing a open span type structure there. Right now there's 3 48-inch culverts that are in bad shape. We're going to replace those with a single arch type structure that will be more trout friendly. And that will be sometime in summer. And like I said, with various maintenance activities. We're already getting started on winter weather activities, getting contractor lined up, getting things ready for the winter. Our winter planning never really ends anymore. We just keep running on through the year. I just also wanted to say about 3 months ago we started having monthly meetings with Mr. Curry. He and I have been communicating on an as-needed basis and situations dictating. We started having a regularly scheduled monthly meeting where we have an agenda and we're able to sort of track things until they're complete, until they're completed to some sort of resolution. I hope that's working well. Like I said, we've done that for about 3 months now. We're going to continue to do that and hope us, keep us on track with things. But that's basically the big things I want to cover with you. If you have any questions or anything on any of the normal routine maintenance stuff, or be glad to answer them before we get into the 11.
Go ahead, Mr. Craig.
If I could, part of Benvenue Road is in Jackson District, from 211 down to Grimsley and and I did get 2 calls about the surface treatment work last week.
Okay.
Complaints.
Okay.
I didn't have coffee or something good.
That's the nature of the business.
Yeah, I got 2 complaints.
Okay.
The loose dust or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll make sure I ride that road on the way back and we'll take care of it.
All right, thank you.
We're going to send you on a lot of roads on your way back because I've got one too.
Well, we keep notes of it.
Yeah, you don't want to keep those. I want to first of all thank you for all the work on the ash trees in Harris Hollow. Boy, what a difference. There's a huge grove and your contractor got those out. There's still logs in the shoulder, and I noted David Jenkins that we need to get those out of there. But the trees are gone, and that's terrific. And there's a whole other grove up around Plains Lane that has been marked. The same guy asked about them, so I appreciate that. Median trimming just around the town of Washington has kind of been an ongoing issue. Just the 3 entrances, there's a bit of limited sight distance, so it sounds like you're going to be doing the median as a whole, so hopefully that'll be addressed. We had an appointment to meet at Clark Lane, and I know you had some family matter that came up that day, and I wonder if you and I could get back there soon to take a look at that entrance to Clark Lane and all the activity that's going on there.
Sure.
It's really important to me, the people who live up there, and I think it's a real problem, so I want to get that on the calendar. Logs and shit. Sunnyside Resurfacing, Sunnyside, branches off of Harris Hollow Road. I don't remember the route number, I apologize. I know you guys think in terms of route numbers, but, a lot of loose gravel, at least I experienced that. So if you could drive through there, maybe David could take a look and just, see if it needs to be vacuumed or swept or whatever you do. Because even a lot of that had gotten on Harris Hollow Road, which is the main drag there. And then finally, I just want to say thank you for the work on Sycamore Ridge. That is Piney Run's an incredible trout stream, so that's a big deal. And I know it's not a small expense to replace those culverts, but that's a great thing. So thanks for that. That's all I have. Thank you.
You're welcome. Appreciate that. Yeah, we'll get those roads swept. I forgot to mention also we did a speed study on Castleton Ford Road, which we figured Supervisor Parrish's request, and we ended up recommending lowering that, or establishing the speed limit of 35 on Castleton Ford Road. I don't know if the sign has been installed yet, but
I think I just saw a communication that they were installed.
and so we mentioned, talked about maybe periodically looking at another road. So that one's done.
I just got a call the other day, a message that someone's interested in 7 ponds. So we'll build a list and bring it back to the board and see which one they may want to have VDOT focus on next.
Right. And we are back up. And I want to introduce Dawson, who is with me today, our district traffic engineer, and he's here to help me out with the 211 subject. They are now fully back up to staff with their engineers. They had gone through a cycle and they were kind of down on a couple of positions, so they're back up to staff. So I think we should be able to stay on top of requests and things a little better than we have been, but look forward to that. And we did get Main Street and Sperryville restriped, and we're going to try to keep that on our list. Make sure. I think we missed last year. That's why I kind of got where you couldn't see the markings. So we'll make sure we keep that and catch that every year.
Thank you so much for that, Mark. And I know the one other item there on Main Street that I think was on the checklist was the pedestrian crossing marking right there in front of the corner store. That was kind of difficult to engineer because of all the signs already on that marker. Have you all come up with a solution to where you could get that?
Yeah, that is a topic of conversation, trying to get the pedestrian.
The only thing we can really do is put pedestrian ahead crossing. There's really no place to put the sign right there at the crosswalk. There's too much going on. So we can put the pedestrian ahead, 500 feet or whatever the distance is. But there's a lot of stuff going on Main Street. So trying to find a place where it's not right in the middle of somebody's front yard and you can still see it, because of vegetation, is the tricky part, is identifying that location.
Okay, well, I think we talked about this probably a year or more ago, and so I would hope that would be a high priority. And I certainly understand if there's not a place on that particular sign to mark it, but I would hope that could be marked in the near future.
It's a crosswalk at the store.
The other thing, one of my constituents brought up the other month, and I don't think we've seen you since then, is she keeps cattle, and when bridges are redone, a lot of time the culvert that's used will make the stream so deep that when she goes in to check for fences, it makes it very difficult. It's very deep, that makes it very difficult for her to make sure that her fences are secure. So she's got some spots out there on 231. If you ever wanted to meet up or had a date when you were in the area and could meet up, and she could show you the problem. It's important and critical. She's trying to be diligent and make sure her cows stay in where they belong, and she just doesn't want to drown in the process.
Okay.
I think on your list there was something about stream scour at bridges, so that may be important for other structural reasons. The significant scour.
If I could get that specific, contact information and location, we'll be glad to do that.
I'll send an email and I'll put you both on it so that you can make contact and
Okay.
get with Lisa.
Okay, we'll do that.
And then I understand some folks have been in touch with you about Woodward Road and being able to access a private lane for fire and rescue, and I just think that sounds like a very worthwhile use of time too. So those were the 3 things on my checklist.
Okay. We're probably gonna have to do a little site visit there because it is a private lane and there's not a lot of right of way or easement there to accommodate large vehicles. so that's, I think if we can put that money together, we'll have a better understanding of it.
Sounds good, I know it would be much appreciated.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Well, I was just gonna ask about the share the road sign.
It's in the study, so thanks.
On the
Share the
field
road
level?
bicycles, yeah.
Yes, yes.
Which is a great segue to the study.
They've been
There's a new-
installed.
There's a new
They
one,
are in
there's a new
place.
one up there on the approach to Sperryville, yeah.
Yeah, there's one on each side of Sperryville.
It's pretty green, sure.
Okay, well, few months ago, we got a request to study the, speed limit on 211 between the park, National Park, and Perryville, where it goes from 4 lanes back to 2 lanes. And also the no passing zones, or passing zones coming in that segment. So we had a nice letter from Mr. Curry for explaining the issues that were made, and the pictures, and a very, very good letter. So we got the traffic engineers and the district, Mr. Austin and his staff, and they scheduled a pretty comprehensive review of the existing speeds. I think they measured speeds in 3 different locations, did a comprehensive crash study of the whole corridor, and they came and did site visits and observed. And I know they don't live there, they don't see things every day like the businesses and property owners do, but from a traffic engineering perspective, we're required by law to do an engineering type review where it has to be reviewed and stamped, and be able to stand behind their work and their studies. And so that's kind of the approach they took. And typically we do a speed study where we do go out and capture the speeds that people are actually traveling on that corridor over a period of time. Typically it's at least a 24 to 48, maybe even longer time period. And try to do it in multiple locations so you kind of get a good idea of speeds on the corridor. Plus we look at all the crashes, I think over a 5-year period. There were obviously a number of crashes, but a significant number of them were related. Some were deer hits, some were driver errors not attributed to speed or passing zone. So it's pretty well laid out in the study. I think a revised one was submitted last week.
So it's posted.
Sort of a breakdown of every crash, and I don't know, you may not have had a chance to evaluate that or read that, but. The results of the study came out that the 85th percentile, which is the number or speed that most people feel like is a safe speed, based on the conditions of the road, and was not low enough that would enable us to lower the speed limit from 45 to 35. And also the distance of the passing zones, while they're not ideal, are based on the land use around them, are necessary to allow people to pass where they can pass, where you have enough of a tangent section that they have the sight distance they can pass. But if they don't, they'll pass illegally, which may be more of a hazard than passing legal passing zone. So unfortunately, we could not, from an engineering perspective, comply with the request to lower the speed limit or remark the passing zone. But we could, we did install the share the road signs as requested, because there are bicycles, and I saw a guy, because we have that slide area up near the park, and there was a guy bicycling up the mountain, and it's painful to watch, but thankfully. So we know that does happen, but unfortunately we couldn't make the data work to support the 2 requests that we did get. So answer questions I can. I've got Mr. Dawson here to help me. I'll fall down.
Madam Chairman, I guess I'll start this off. I just want to say that I think there's going to be a lot of unhappy people with the results of this speed study, and I don't think that's news to you. You've been in a lot of these meetings where people really want folks to slow down as they traverse around Sperryville or head up to the park. It's a dangerous area, whether it's deer or distracted drivers or people turning in and off of the road. There's a lot of things that cause hazards, and for some of these things, speed has been determined to be a factor. And I know we've discussed that before too. So I guess for my part, I understand that you did the study as you need to do and came to the findings that you see fit. What's the next step for us as a board if we don't like the findings?
Well, there's not a really established appeal process. Obviously, if you feel like we need to pursue the matter, I mean, it's up to y'all. I don't know that typically when, this is not the first time we've ever done a study that didn't,
Right, I'm
people didn't
sure.
agree with it.
I'm very sure that it
And
happens all the
a lot
time.
of times, we've had people like the governor, the congressman, and whatever, and basically all it does is get filtered back down to us to review, and we say the same thing, and we end up even writing a letter for the governor back to whoever made the request. I'm having a hard time saying what you could do if you obviously wanted to pursue the in-run type thing. Certainly, you can do anything you want to, but most likely all that does is it comes back to us to basically reiterate what we've already said.
Do you think the time of year would impact at all the findings that you might make on the speed study, knowing how very, very busy it gets through that stretch during peak leaf season in October?
Yes.
I'd like to add a couple things about the speeds and the way we look at this and the crashes, because that's the important issues. First off, Mark mentioned the 85th percentile. Federal Highway Administration, that's their guidelines for determining speed limit. Is speed limit should be within 5 miles per hour of the 85th percentile. Because generally, drivers are going to drive the speeds that they're comfortable driving on any given road under the conditions. And it's been decided by the Federal Highway Administration that the 85th percentile is a good measure of that. The 85th percentile came back at 51.8 miles per hour, so a little higher than the posted speed limit, but not excessive. I will point out, since 1999, there have been 4 speed studies for the same stretch of road by 4 different traffic engineers. And each one of the speed studies had the same recommendation for the speed limit. And it's based on the 85th percentile. When you look at the crashes, over 5 years, the last 5 years, there were 27 crashes in the area. When you do a deeper dive into it, there were, I think, maybe 3 crashes where they reference speed. And when we talk about referencing speed, we're talking about in excess of what the posted speed limit and what the advisory speeds are. There was nothing indicating that if a driver was driving the posted speeds or the advisory speeds, that was a contributing factor to the crash. Mark had mentioned the animal aspect. I think there were 5 or 6 crashes where they either hit an animal or they were swerving to avoid an animal, which here again, speed really doesn't, you're going to have those types of issues regardless of speed limits. I think there were 2 DUI crashes, which we all know the impacts of that. I believe that there were 3 crashes that the crash report referenced some form of distraction. Now, I personally believe that there's a lot more distracted driving that goes on than what's reported, because proving a distracted driving crash is a hard thing to do, because for one thing, most drivers aren't going to admit that they were doing something other than paying attention to the road. If there, heaven forbid, was a fatality or something like that, it's kind of hard to prove that. So when a crash report specifically notes that there's distracted driving going on, that's something that we tend to take notice of, because there was something that led that law officer to know that, hey, this driver was not paying attention to what they're doing. Of those 27 crashes, you had several that were angle crashes, nowhere near, but there were like 2 or 3 at 522 and 211. One of the crashes that was reported was a commercial vehicle traveling westbound on 211, making a left-hand turn onto Main Street and getting hung up on guardrail. Well, that's the things that are showing up in these numbers of crashes that really have nothing to do with the speed or the passing zone. Now, there were 2 crashes that occurred within the passing zone in question. One of them was a deer crash, which we can't do anything about. The second one involved a vehicle that had slowed down to make a left-hand turn into the trading post and got rear-ended. It had nothing to do with a passing maneuver. If it had anything to do, it was the second vehicle was following too closely. I think that access management plays a role in some of this, because if you think about the businesses along 211, there's not great access management. A lot of the businesses, the entire frontage is left wide open. Where people are supposed to turn into the property is not easily defined, and that creates confusion for a driver that contributes to some of these crashes. So here again, it's not really related to the speed or the passing zone at all. There's a lot of other contributing factors that are causing these things. So I just wanted to try clearing up some of that. Because the other thing that was interesting is that out of the 27 crashes, I can't remember the exact numbers. I can only remember 1 year, but there was like 4 crashes, 6 crashes a year. Then, for whatever reason, in 2019, there were 19 crashes. I don't know what happened in 2019 to cause all those crashes. Then we looked at, are these happening in the fall? Out of those 19 crashes, one happened, I believe it was in January. One happened, I think, in November. And then the rest of them were between May and September 1st. So these are not necessarily related to the foliage change when the number of vehicles in the area really increased. So I don't know what happened in 2019, but 2019 is the outlier where 19 of the 27 crashes happened that year. So
what about the guy laying in the road?
well, that's absolutely. I didn't want to mention that one, but yeah, that's one where it has nothing to do with speed or the passing.
He'd lay down, take a nap, or just pass out?
The crash report marked illness on it. It's all marked. I've heard different speculation about what may have been going on there, which I prefer not to get into. But that's something that is not related to the speed or passing.
Two sort of macro perspective questions that I guess one possible request, I don't mean to get on this turf here, but during the pandemic, we saw this huge increase in traffic in the Shenandoah National Park, and we can see where we're headed again, and what effect that's going to have on people flocking here to get outside. So my question is, can we at least, if you're okay with this, as an interim solution, get during the fall months, and I recognize you're saying that doesn't seem to be a high crash time period, but nevertheless, volume and crazy drivers and trip after trip up to the national park, people driving too fast, it's going to happen. Could we get at least electronic reader boards on the approach going
I think that's a great idea.
and just say, I don't care what it says, hey dude, slow down, it's fall, and we know you want to be outside, something. But just to send a message that Sperryville is kind of a tight little knot of commercial activity, and people are flying through there and slow down. So at least as we approach this fall, if you're okay with it.
You all have been great. They've been great about doing
Yeah,
that last
we
year.
gotta
I
do something.
requested.
I think that's a great idea. I to be honest with you, I don't know over the course of the year it's going to change the numbers that much, because it doesn't appear that that's your top problem. But I think it's a good idea.
It's awareness, and people are repeat visitors to the park, and at least it just says to them, hey, there's a lot going on here. Second, my macro perspective question on the Rappahannock County Planning Commission, the Rappahannock County Board of Supervisors, this body, we're hearing more and more applications from businesses that are located in that Sperryville area, including one we're going to hear tonight, a small brewery right there, kind of near the intersection of 522 and 211 Sperryville. And my question is, does your analysis take into account, you mentioned that a lot of the businesses have sort of ill-defined entrances and exits, but setting that aside, does your analysis take into account the total number of businesses in a stretch of road? Because I can tell you, I mean, the evidence is clear, there's more going on in that area, which means there are more people pulling in, pulling out, and your analysis suggests to me that you're focused on FHWA 85% percentile speed on the road, but you're not looking at who's coming and going from the side of the road. And with more businesses there, to me, that seems like that should be part of your analysis.
It does not specifically look at that. I'll remind the board that 211 is a principal arterial. I mean, the whole purpose of principal arterials are moving vehicles as safely and as efficiently as possible. And if you look up the definition, it says typically on higher speed roads.
Okay.
Now, 45 miles an hour, if you drive 45 miles an hour on that stretch, because I did it twice a day, often you will have a vehicle that pulls up right behind you, wanting to go on past. So 45 miles an hour, it's kind of a challenge to drive there. I'm not recommending we raise the speed limit by no means.
Yeah.
But I just don't know that there's justification to change. Now, I would strongly urge any consideration of new businesses to take a close look at their entrances, because that better defines the conflict points on that stretch. It gives drivers an idea of where they need to be turning instead of guessing where they're supposed to be turning. So I would strongly urge that.
Okay.
The other thing I'll mention, I went as far to look at the addresses, because the crash reports I get has the addresses of the people involved in the crash. And I don't have the exact numbers, but I think it's about 30 to 40% of the drivers were either from Page County, Rappahannock County, or Culpeper or Madison County. So generally local drivers that are generally familiar. I would have thought that it would have been higher about out-of-towners.
That ruins our whole theory. Stop.
Well, I don't make up the data. I just try to interpret it. So, that's,
Can you go back up some data and come back?
I don't make up the data. So I'm sorry.
It's tourists.
We would expect local people to be driving more frequently on these roads, so they would certainly account for it.
That's part of it. I think what you see a lot with local drivers, they get used to the roads and think that they can drive faster than what they should be. And that's, that happens.
All right.
Is there a different way of classifying that portion from Sperryville to the park that maybe we could team up with the park and cause a classification that would be slow down and enjoy the scenery or on the way to the park? It seems there's gotta be a way to get around people just flying through, especially when we want them to shop. We want them to stop and be tourists.
The biggest way, and I hate to just say this every time, but enforcement's the way you stop the speed. But like I said, the data shows the 85th percentile is you have relatively good compliance with the speed limit.
Can I ask you, what is your experience with, they now have those digital signs that you can mount under speed limit signs that are about the same size, but it says your speed and then it calculates your speed and displays it. What is your experience as an engineer, and what's VDOT's experience in general with those sorts of display units?
My experience is they're more effective if you move them around.
Okay.
If you look at the permanent installations, over time, drivers tend to ignore those, especially if they're not seeing law enforcement in the area. They get disregarded. When you move them around, it's something new that catches the driver's attention. And if they're just slowing down because they're seeing something flash at them, and not necessarily paying attention to their speed, it's still slowing them down. So I fully support placing those at specific times of the year, just targeted times, and trying to impact the speeds that way. Central office has done studies on it, or they have referenced studies where generally you see maybe a 5 mile an hour impact based on the permanent installations.
That's a lot.
It depends on how, I mean, between 55 and 50 or 45 and 40, I mean, it's 5 miles per hour.
And do you all have signs available now? I know sometimes there's an issue with signs when we ask for them that they're being used on projects and one can't be allocated to us, but I know we went through this last summer. But if there's ever a spare sign that you can position at that spot in the village of Sperryville near the Water and Sewer Authority like we experienced last summer, or where 211 comes down to one lane as it goes up to the park, that's really helpful if you ever have a spare sign.
I think we've got one out on 211 now.
Oh, you do?
Coming down.
But coming down.
Yeah, coming down.
Yeah, it seems like both
We'll
sides.
move it to Flint Hill next week. He's next on the list. Unless you want me to leave it up in Sperryville for another couple.
I think you need another sign. How are they calibrated?
We don't have any in traffic engineering side. What do you guys do for calibrating?
Well, they do it in the shop, and I've never watched them do it, but there's a method for calibrating them.
It's not a regulatory device, so
It's just information. Yeah. All right.
Well, I think we'll probably need to send some letters out, but I appreciate your time and your
Thanks a lot.
thoughtfulness in putting
Very
this stuff
thorough.
together.
Very thorough explanation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mark, I'll get in touch with you
Okay,
about any,
right, and 231 Lake.
Gotcha.
and then look at Sunnyside.
All right, we are now up to Beaver Dam analogs with Mr. Fletcher.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Mr. Bird, Mr. Goff, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk prejudice today. It concerns probably our most important natural resource, water. And I may notice it more than most other people because my farm's directly been affected and I've got a lot less water on it now than I did 10 years ago, than I did 20 years ago, than I did 30 years ago. I've talked to a number of geologists, geomorphologists, EPA. I've talked to 50 or 100 people trying to figure it out. And one of the problems we really have in Rappahannock, and I've sent all of you a plethora of information. I don't know if you've read it, but it's in the hundreds and probably thousands of pages of stuff that I've gone through, and I'm going to try to give you a general synopsis. And I'm going to try to keep it to 5 minutes, which is very hard for a lawyer and in particular for me to do. But what I believe, I'll truncate it and tell you the result. I believe we've lost most of our aquifer in Rappahannock County, the higher elevations. I live at Thornton Hill off Fletcher's Mill Road, and I can go up to Turkey Mountain and above a certain height, there are basically no springs. The top of Turkey Mountain is about 1,200 feet. And probably at about the 700 to 800 foot mark, there are no longer any springs popping out of the mountain. Parts of it go down to 750 feet. At that level, we lost 5 springs since 1970. This has caused a tremendous water shortage on my farm. I've also noticed in my lifetime that the Thornton River has gone down approximately a foot. When I was a child, we used to go, and Chris used to go, we had a lot better canoeing than we do now. It's virtually impossible to canoe the Thornton 90% of the times that we can do it at Thornton Hill are probably 25% of what they were 30 years ago. But then I came and I was down on the farm one day and I noticed that we put a beaver dam in. Or we didn't put a beaver dam, we had a dam and the beavers nicely put a beaver dam in. And back from that dam, we've had 5 to 7 springs pop up to a quarter to a half mile away. And I was sitting there saying, what has happened? And then I started reading. I read the book Eager, and I talked to a boy called Bill Summerlight in Ohio, and he told me about what they were doing in Utah and Nevada and everywhere else. Mr. Hoffman and I are supposed to meet with a man that started it on the East Coast in Maryland and has gotten a couple projects promoted. We're the highest elevation of everything to the east of us. So we're the headwaters, so we're going to be the first to go dry. I mean, water runs downhill, it seeks its own level, which is the ocean. So we've got more pressure on our aquifers and our land, I believe, than most other people. And the beaver was a keystone species in this area, and they pretty much were trapped out 250 years ago. A keystone species is an organism that helps to define an entire ecosystem. Without its keystone species, the ecosystem would be dramatically different or cease to exist altogether. Now, I don't think we've got the beavers necessary to do the things that beaver dams do. So what I'm suggesting is a program of BDAs or beaver dam analogs. And the beaver dams have a number of natural characteristics that would help the county, I believe. One, they slow the water as it's coming down, which will reduce flooding, or reduce erosion, reduce sediment, blah, 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 blah. The second thing they'll do is filter the water. All the water that we drink today is filtered in some fashion. It goes through to the ocean and then it evaporates and comes back down. We all know that. But the other thing that's happening in Rappahannock that's very concerning to me is we've got a lot of what I call acid rain. And we've got a lot of pollutants in the air and heavy metals which are contaminating our soils, and they're going to contaminate our water. So how do we get those contaminants out? Well, the best and most effective way we can get them out is by filtering the water. And what I'm suggesting is a beaver dam analog, or it's a man-made beaver dam, basically, that's a semi-permeable weir. It slows the water, it filters, it helps the aquifers, it helps replenish the aquifers because of the backwards hydraulic pressure. In this county, I think it's particularly important. And I've talked to Mr. Hoffman and the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, tried to call the section, I'm not going to go, but I made over 200 or 300 calls on this issue because I personally believe it's important. I think Rappahannock County has a possibility of being the greenest county, the healthiest county with the best water. Also, when you put the beaver dam in a stream, it helps the habitat. It brings deer and bear and turkey. I mean, it's amazing the difference in flora and fauna like you wouldn't believe. I'm glad I've taken most of the board down there and other people, but if anybody'd like to see the difference in the environment caused by beaver dams, I'm glad to show you. It's really amazing. And the other thing is it helps the soil so much. right now, with the present agricultural practices of inundating the land with lime, and lime is an essential component of cement, in my opinion. It makes the land harder. And I've read all kinds of studies, but one of them was fascinating to me. It says we're getting 27% more hard rains than we did 2 years ago. Well, the harder the rain, the less it's going to stay on and the more erosion it's going to cause. So we need something, I think, to protect our refill our recharge our aquifers. And we also need to be protecting our water. I think this Cleveridge's Corner division that's coming in with 750 houses. I mean, it's beyond me. Mr. Curry is a engineer. What's 750 times 100,000?
750,000.
How much is it?
7.5 million.
Huh?
7.5 million.
Okay. Well, you got that. They're going to be taking 10 or 20 million gallons of water out of the headwaters or the aquifers that may be from here. The other problem I've had in trying to do my research, they used to have a lot of stream counters, there's only one in the county on Battle Run.
Monitoring.
And I wrote the expert on that. I said, can you tell me it's gone up or down? He said, no. He said, it's too complicated to figure because we don't have enough information. I called the health department, and this is something that I think the Board of Supervisors can really do to help. There's a program called Venus, VENIS, that the health department, and one of their categories is to longitude, latitude, where they first hit the water, where they second hit the water, and where they finally stay.
For well drilling, right?
What's that?
When they're drilling wells.
When they're drilling wells. I think it's within the county's power under their building code to require that all well drillers do this, and if they don't before getting a permit or anything, or being signed off on, that be filled out and filled in accurately, and that way we might have some, as citizens of Rappahannock, an early warning when we're getting in real trouble. Without that, we don't have anything. I tried to find the weather rainfalls for Rappahannock County for the last 50 years. Impossible. Not there, not compiled. Dennis Wingfield had it, for probably 35 years. Now, Run Amok System's been doing it for about 25, but they didn't get the old information and how it's evaluated isn't on a standard that you can see the difference. Basically, we get somewhere between 35 and 45 inches of rain, sometimes as high as 80 to 90 inches in certain areas. But there's no way anybody understands what's occurring in the Rappahannock County watershed. And if we don't understand it, and we're in the most danger for losing water. But if we do these BDAs and then the Board of Supervisors, and we're asking for grants for everybody, we're going to send out a letter today to help us do a study that'll be approved by the state, because they won't take other states' information. They want to know what's done on the ground. Mr. Hoffman's found a man from Ecotone who's looked at all the studies, and they've done a couple programs in Maryland. But I think instead of being at the back end of everything, let's try to be on the front end and protect Rappahannock County, because there will become a point of no return. And there's no question. I used to argue against global warming. I thought it was a weather pattern and all. Well, what I've seen in the last 10 years, something's happened. And there's no question, and it's magnifying exponentially. And you see what happens in the Midwest and Lake Mead, yada, yada, yada. If we get hit with it, we don't have any water towers, we don't have anything. And most of this county is apple orchards. I mean, the agrarian part of it is apple orchards or cropland or cattle. And they would all be devastated if we got hit by a real drought. Now, if we do these BDAs, it's amazing the difference in the water quality in the land and also the protection for the farmer in case of drought. It also cleans up. I think eventually if the state and federal government look at it, they'll pay farmers to do BDAs. Because I think it's going to be such a benefit. It's easier to take the pollutants out now at the source than at the other one. I've got one stream that's pretty low line that they would recommend 10 BDAs in it. And they're pretty simple manufacture process, and we're hoping to have a demonstration at Thornton Hill on September 27th. But the Army Corps of Engineers now say we need to have a permit that they won't charge for, but it takes about 60 days, and so that may come in the future. I've been working on this thing a lot since February, and I'm aggravated, but if you all could do something to help and have a monitoring system by the wells, it would give the data we need to do this. Also, if the county could push for some more water monitoring stations on the rivers, whether private or state, or have some of these other organizations get into it, I think it would be a real help, because the wars in the future are going to be fought over water. That's what I see all the time. And we've got a tremendous amount of water that's falling here now, but we could be hit with a 22-year drought like the Midwest. You know, nobody understands water, and nobody understands weather, but I think if we start or become proactive, it could really be one of the best things that we've ever done in Rappahannock County, and I think we'd be a leader for the state. And it wouldn't cost the Board of Supervisors that much money. We're sending out grant applications, and we'll certainly send Mr. Curry one. I think the budget for the initial start of it is $170,000, which is expensive. But, you know, we've got to get scientists from Virginia Tech to come up here and monitor and do a lot of things, and it depends. I mean, if you got into the complexity of the woods and how you build them and everything, it's really complicated. I mean, I wish Mr. Curry would figure it out for me, but I don't think he has the time, and it's almost a full-time job. But Mr. Hoppin's here. He's going to speak to you a second about it. And then if you have any questions for either of us, we'll be glad to try. But I'm not an expert, but I've read a lot.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Bill.
Thanks for your leadership on that.
Thanks, Mr. Fletcher. Madam Chair, members of the board, my name is Brian Hoffman. I'm the Deputy Director with Friends of the Rappahannock. We're an environmental nonprofit that serves 18 counties from Shenandoah National Park down to the Chesapeake Bay. I'll help with the point. The stream gauges are what Mr. Fletcher was talking about, and I encourage you to reach out to the Rappahannock Rapidan Regional Commission and the Rappahannock River Basin Commission, who are working with the Virginia Department of Emergency Management to deploy a series of those early warning stream gauge monitors for temperature and stream flow to help better predict downstream flooding. The pandemic put a lot of that on hold, but there is money in place to do that, and we are looking for sites to put those. So Rappahannock, there's plenty of places here for that. I'm not here to do a lecture on beaver dam analogs, but I will say that across the Commonwealth, all of our natural resource agencies and nonprofits are striving to find nature-based solutions to address our environmental concerns. You can use riprap to solve problems. You can use concrete to solve problems, but you've just got concrete that eventually will crack. If there's a nature-based solution, it's going to grow and be resilient with time, and you're going to get all of those positive externalities. In the case of these beaver dam analogs, you might be trying to address groundwater recharge, but you're going to get carbon sequestration, better soil health, refugia for fish and wildlife habitat. So we're working, we've brought in a number of folks from Virginia Tech's Biological Systems Engineering. We are submitting funded proposals. This is a West Coast technology that's worked really well, and we're trying to figure out how to do it here and make it in vogue so that it is a tool that Culpeper Soil and Water District has in their back pocket, our local Department of Wildlife Resources has in their back pocket, and our agricultural students at local high schools can start building these things as well. I appreciate your time, and hopefully we will be able to come back and invite everyone to come out and see one of these in practice. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I've got some beavers on Harris Hollow Road if you want them, for starters. Okay. I'm kidding. I got in trouble last time I mentioned that to anybody.
The live trap a beaver, I believe.
My question is, so you identify the Venus program, which would be the mapping latitude and longitude of wells drilled, I assume for new construction, or if somebody's putting in a new well on an old property. Aside from that, what, in your view, based on what you've reviewed so far, would be the practical role that our local government would play in this program? And
Well, I think you could mandate under the building code that they not only put the longitude, latitude, and the height or elevation of the well, and then how long when they hit first groundwater, which is basically surface water, which most of the people in Sperryville are going off of, and then it goes through a layer of semi-permeable rock to another layer that's probably a bigger river or lower aquifer. I don't know which, but if you had all that information, I believe you could kind of tell. You had, I called the health department, I said, how many wells have you dug this year? And the answer was, well, we've dug more this year than we did last. I said, how many are replacement wells, or how many replacement wells have been dug in the county in the last 5 years? I said, I don't know. How many this year? Do you know? Could you give me a percentage? I don't know.
okay, so
But if it went into the system, and it was documented in its electronic system run by the state, it wouldn't cost us anything. All the board of supervisors have to do is say, you've got to fill this format, or look at it and say, okay, you've got to tell us when you hit surface water, when you hit the big pool of water you go to where you've got enough flow. If you did that, then their computer models, I think you could pretty well figure out in the county after a certain amount of time where the streams are, where the water is. And it would cost, I mean, what they spend on the investigation of Cliff Miller's golf course, $30,000 to $60,000. Can you imagine what it would cost the county?
right.
If you all got a water problem, you've got to, there's a mechanism out there, all you've got to do is figure out a way to enforce it, and they do it east of 95 now. I think you can make it I don't see why you couldn't make it a requirement for the county.
So when,
And you'd be getting data that would help all the citizens of the county make Mr. Goff figure out how to make it a fine if they don't fill it out correctly or if they do it incorrectly. And it doesn't cost you anything, and then you got some information you can work with. Right now, nobody, I mean, I've called 5 geologists. Why is the Thornton River going down 2.5 feet in the last 200 years? We don't know.
so when you say beaver dam analog, I presume you're talking about streams and the rivers, right?
Well, it's mainly the streams.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping we're gonna be able to get away from the Army Corps of Engineers, because that's just another hurdle and a
Right.
permit. They don't charge for the permit, in my understanding, but it's a 60-day review process before you get the permit or something. It's crazy. I mean,
Well, nothing's stopping you from going out there and putting your own dam and let the,
oh yeah, there is.
yeah.
That's what the Army Corps of Engineers is saying.
Yeah, you can lay some, what I saw, you can lay some trees down or across the stream. But so the beavers, you know, that right now there are not that many beavers on the Thornton where I am.
Right.
And but sometimes there's, you know, 4 or 5 beaver dams within a mile, and then next thing you get a big rain, a big flood, and they're all gone. And then the beavers, I don't know where they go, but and it's a long time before they come back. And but what I wouldn't want is to get a situation where the flooding would actually come out on the bottom lands that are cropped, or yeah. And so that I can understand the streams, you know, where they go out in the pastures. That's something different.
Well, you control by how many you build and how you build them, pretty much how they're gonna last, I think, Chris. I mean, you can put in an initial one if you wanna try with, things, it's like hazelwood, alders, and willows. And the other interesting thing about it, if you make it out of, and this is one of the things I really like, Mr. Hoffman and all, I started doing myself, but there are certain woods that have antimicrobial actions in them, and they take the pollutants out of the water. That are much better than, and there's a difference in densities of the wood and how long it'll last. I mean, it's a simple idea. But it can really be as complex, it can be really very complex, and you almost need an engineer like, and I think a quarter of a mile, part of my farm goes from 1,200 feet to 500 feet. And that's a pretty big elevation, and depending on the rains we've got, I'm sure we're gonna have to replace a lot of those dams a lot of times to get it right. But I think we're gonna have a real benefit in the long run.
Interesting.
Mr. Parrish, as a part of that permit process, we do look at designs and do some stream surveys to design the structures, and we take into account the impacts, the downstream flooding, and so we don't want any of these structures to fail and cause impacts to downstream landowners. So that's all taken into account in that review process.
So when you're putting one in, I mean, are you looking around, I mean, you have to attract, you put them in, the pool of water is supposed to attract beavers. And I guess it works some without the beavers. But, so there has to be beavers in the area to find that pool of water to go ahead and start building their own dams, correct?
So one could only hope that a beaver would come and take it over, because I certainly don't want to be going out there every couple of weeks to add some sticks and such to it. Like he was saying, they are the keystone species. These are what used to be all over our country, our landscape and our watersheds, and they would fail and get clogged up in the next one, and they'd rebuild it. It's a very dynamic system where right now our mindset is trying to keep things clean, get the water from one side to the other one without any obstructions, when actually that's the problem. Our water's raining here, and we channelize it, and then it leaves the county, and it's out into the bay where it's no good to anybody, except the watermen that work the bay down there. So the more we can keep the water on site and infiltrate it, and this doesn't just have to be once the water's in a stream system, if we can encourage infiltration in our crop fields, off our parking lots into rain gardens and other green infrastructure. We're working with elementary school to design some green infrastructure into that. Anything we can do to get the water to go into the ground. It takes 2 times, 3 times as long for water to move underground. It's probably a drastic underestimation, but if we can get it in the ground, it's going to stay here longer, and it's going to provide a lot of benefits instead of just running off a parking lot into a storm drain and off it and away.
Super interesting.
Very interesting.
Is there any difference between these beaver dam analogs and leaky weirs, or what are those things called? Is it leaky weirs? I first read about those when the development, the Black Kettle development started to come about, they were talking about mitigating some of the water issues there with leaky weirs. So they're exactly the same, it's just a different jargon? Okay.
And they you use on-site materials mainly. So you don't want treated bows, you want to, it depends on the flow and the engineering, what you need, but it's mainly mud, rocks, sticks, and leaves.
Are there other counties already tracking the well, the digging of the well and the different levels of the waters being hit and stuff?
In the groundwater management areas, they're permitted by the state, you have to. But they also restrict large withdrawal users and things like that, which don't apply over here. Well, of course, we don't have any of those, really.
But it sounds like the data's not being held in a way that's easy to access, or?
They aren't in. I mean, the health department in Rappahannock, they haven't any of the information in mind.
I think that would be the water, Culpeper water.
Well, the VDH permits the drinking water wells, and we can, Mr. Goff and I can review state code and see what we're empowered to require or not. Maybe privileges granted to those in the groundwater management areas that we don't have, but we can review that.
That's my question for Mr. Hoffman was, do you know if there's east of 95, the data is mandated, the reporting of the data?
I can't give you a definitive answer on that, but I do know there are specific requirements in that Eastern Virginia groundwater management area.
In order to do something like this, we'd have to have a specific statutory grant of authority to do that. We can't just make it up. We got to have some sort of authority from Richmond to require somebody to keep data like that.
Is it fundamentally a dome rule issue?
It's going to be a dome rule issue. We can't just make it up on a whole cloth.
Yeah. And it may be there. It may be a may in the code. And we can review that and find out.
Okay.
I'm not an attorney, but this would not be restricting individuals' rights on the property. It would just be data that's already there from the contractor, the well driller, is just being reported for the beneficial use of the entire county.
Well, sure, but for us to mandate it, we got to have some authority to do that.
Yes, sir.
And that's got to come from Richmond, not from us.
Well, I think Loudoun County's already got legislation on their books, and they're less than 95.
Okay.
I talked to somebody the other day, and they said that the permits, they were doing this stream bank mitigation, and they said the permits from Loudoun County for the water and water quality was adding 6 months or a year to the job. I hope we can streamline it, but I'll pay you $1 to have done that we can figure out a way, maybe under the local building ordinance or something that we can require the well drillers. They're supposed to give the form anyway, but we need to get it filled out and put into the system.
Now, I read your material, I just was, my legal question was to the extent to which the county, without a specific grant of authority, statutorily could.
Well, if you can't figure it out, I've talked to all the legislators that represent this county, and I'm sure, and they're all said it's a great idea, and.
It might be, we need a legislative fix.
Well, we can do that, but, if you look at it the next month and figure out what we need, I'll help get it done.
All right. Any other questions, comments?
That was great.
Sounds like another an item for next month's agenda. Follow-up item.
And if you do confirm the date for the demo, please let us know.
I will be glad to. Mr. Hoffman's in charge of that. I've been pushing to have it done since August, but the government moves extremely slowly.
Not this one.
No. All righty then. Thank you very much.
We're nimble. Thanks a lot.
No, but I think it's an opportunity for the county to really do something. I mean, what we get mainly out of the county is a tax bill.
Yeah.
And this is something that could, I think, really help the county and every farmer and every individual in it. Because I mean, the times are coming. I mean, they draw 155 million gallons out of the aquifer for Northern Virginia every day.
We get the picture. We got a lot on the agenda too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Hey, Bill,
you,
thanks a
Bill.
lot.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for all your work on this. It's really interesting.
No problem.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman.
There you are.
Thank you.
All right, moving into public comment. If anyone wishes to speak, please raise your hand, and when you come up, give us your name and the district that you're in. Yes, sir.
If I may, Madam Chair, I believe there may be a number of members of the public who wish to speak to the Dowling Tourist Home application, and I would just observe that since that's not on for public hearing today, it would be an appropriate time for them to share their comments in the public comments section. I just wanted them to be aware of that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Anita Ramos, Hampton District. I've just listened to Mr. Fletcher and known him a long time. And I want to say that he's on point. He's exactly on point. And if you want to realize how on point he is, most of you were not on the board when there was a water study done back 10, 12 years ago.
Right.
My husband was on that committee, and Mr. Bondola did a whole lot of work, who is an international hydrologist, and he's right there. And if you've ever seen drought, and I have seen it once in my life somewhere else, it's pretty scary. And at the time, I said to the board, why aren't we doing something to get farmers, landowners to keep more water on their property? Or the county having some property with water on it. So now's the time to not just think about it, but do something about it. I don't know the full answer, but it's definitely, we've got some bad times coming one of these days soon. And we're going to have to be able to be able to say we've already faced that problem, we've met it. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Anita. So I hand over here somewhere. Yes, sir.
I'm Al Regnery. I live in the Hampton District, and I just want to very quickly tell you that I support Mr. Dowling's application for a tourist home. I think it's a good thing. I'm a neighbor. I believe it will not infringe on anybody's privileges or rights, from what I understand. And simply, it seems to me that any time we can add beds in this county for people, particularly that are priced at a reasonable rate, it keeps people in the county. Certainly, Mr. Dowling's doing a great thing with his renovation of the Blue Rock Inn. As we all know, that place has had its ups and its downs over the years, and having another reasonably priced restaurant, I think, is a terrific thing. I know we go to your restaurant quite often, Debbie, but from time to time you need another place, and increasingly people go out of the county and the money is spent in Fauquier or Warren or Culpeper or wherever. To the extent we can keep it here, obviously it's a good thing. It keeps taxes going and keeps people in the county. So really that's all I have to say. I hope you'll approve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Madam Chairman, members of the board, I'm John Gevermont. I own Reality Farm and Gevermont Winery. And Al just took the thunder out of everything I wanted to say, but dittos to my support for Mr. Dowling's application. I think it only adds to the business opportunities and for the entire county and for the tourism and agriculture business. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Margaret Bond from the Piedmont District, and I'm going to steal a little bit of the previous thunder and say I know Mr. Dowling from having met him a couple times on the property, and so that's what I'm here to speak about, as well as I met Mr. Brown when I came to speak before the Planning Commission regarding the same piece of property. It's item G1 on your agenda, so it's coming right up. If I understand correctly, that the issue here is to make a slight modification or replace the special exception conditions regarding use of a house which exists on this 79-acre piece of property. It's not the inn itself, it's just a separate piece of property down about a third of a mile of a gravel road, a separate road from the Blue Rock Inn. If you extended and continued on that gravel road past this house in question, it would go to a couple barns that are at the terminus of the road, and that's where I keep a couple horses. So I go past this piece of property every single day, and I've done that for the past 5 years. Quite familiar with it. When I first saw this house, it was probably 10 years in abandonment. It had a roof on it, but it had no windows or doors or anything, and it was very much of a mess inside. Animals had moved in, birds had moved in. The surrounding area, which had, if you remember had once been a vineyard, was completely overgrown, bushes, shrubs, trees, undergrowth. It was quite an unsightly vista to travel through. 2 years ago or so, when Mr. Dowling came to purchase the Blue Rock property, took a special interest in this house, which is all and on the existing footprint of the house. There's no addition to it. Completely renovated it inside, outside. The grounds around it has completely cleaned off the vineyard, replanted the vineyard. He graciously gave my husband and myself a tour of the inside of the house, and I could say it's as well appointed as the outside, which now has no siding, and it's quite a lovely farmhouse in a setting of a vineyard on this 80 acres of a property, very much of a rural and appeal, and sitting in the middle of an agricultural area. It is quite an appropriate, setting. The property now really is, having gone from probably a health hazard as well as a danger to be on the grounds, is now turned into a very useful and very sightly piece of real estate. It's ready for use. I think that the type of use envisioned for it, which would be, if I recall correctly, the previous owner had gotten the exception for building this house to be a personal residence, and as people's finances changed, ran out of money partway through, is why the whole project was abandoned. But what Mr. Dowling proposes to do is keep that residential nature of the house, allow it to be used, if not for one family, it would be groups of that same size, and no more, thereby keeping the amount of use of the lane down, keeping the amount of use of the property down to what it would have been had the original owner decided to live there. I should also reference, if you're not familiar with what this looks like, the property is not visible from 211. It's not really visible from the inn itself. It is barely visible by the neighbors, so it's very much surrounded in an agricultural setting. He proposes to modify the use that had originally been approved. It's certainly a construction which fits very much into the rural agricultural zoning existing on that property. But most important, it does allow for a revenue stream that heretofore had not been existent, and of course a revenue stream which would benefit the county in terms of taxes, increased property values, and so forth. So we definitely would support a favorable consideration of his application. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Margaret.
Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Mark Anderson from the Piedmont District, and I, of course, have to echo everything that was just said. Otherwise, there would be domestic unrest. This property I've seen almost every day for the last 5 years, as Margaret explained. I've spoken to several prominent realtors about what to be done with the property. They all said it should be a tear down. The only option I heard to a tear down was to have it as a demonstration firefighting project for the fire department. Mr. Dowling didn't believe any of that, and he went ahead and fixed it back up anyway. And when I first saw it, it was really in bad shape inside. Just framing, pretty much. The floors were partly done. He has more than doubled the cost of whatever was spent on that house before, and he's done a superlative job. It's farmhouse architecture. It fits in very nicely with the setting. And I don't think you'll see a more attractive farmhouse anywhere in this county. This property, as you know, is 79 acres. Most of the property you may not know is a horse operation. There's 2 horse barns, there's 3 training arenas, there's about 5 paddocks, there's a complete steeplechase track inside the property, which the high school uses for its cross-country program, which is good. And it's got the only polo arena within 35 miles of here. All agricultural uses. The farmhouse itself is tucked in, as Margaret just said, between the vineyard, which has been totally redone, and the horse barns. So it's an agricultural type thing. And it is hard to see from anywhere. The road access that was referenced, it's far enough down the road from the high school entrance that it shouldn't interfere at all. It's on the other side of the highway too. I'm going to let Attorney Brown explain exact nuances of what they're asking for in the change to the special exception, but to me, it's pretty modest. And I really encourage you to approve what they're asking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks a lot.
Yes, sir.
Madam Chair, board members, Mr. Curry, my name is Rick Lassard on Kilby Farm in the Piedmont District. I'm here to support this application, this special exception. I won't go into all these other things. I thought everybody had a very good, reasoning for this special exception. To go back 20 years, my sister and my niece both got married at the Blue Rock. So I think it's one of the most beautiful settings for a wedding here in the county, and I hope it becomes a wedding venue. And I think the house, you could all blame me for the house, because 2008, 3 owners ago, I talked to Mr. Harwood, who was one of the owners of the property. Mr. Harwood and I were looking at the house, and he said, "What should I do with it?" And I said, "You better put a roof on it with asphalt shingles, or you're going to lose the house." And obviously, I got him a contractor. We put a roof on the house, and it saved the house for Mr. Dowling to renovate, which would have completely disintegrated within the 14 years that it happened. So I'm here to support the application. My wife and I are looking forward to welcoming Mr. Dowling to the community, and I hope you do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Sheila Gressinger, Hampton District. I'm going to have a little change of pace, a little bit change of subject. I want to talk a little bit about solar, because that's been an initial conversation that the county has had in various meetings lately. I went on a drive around the county. Solar is here already. When I was coming down the road from the Mount Airy place on Woodson Road, one of the first things I saw at the bottom was a vast array of solar on the rooftop there.
Where is that?
Coming down Woodward Road as you're approaching the entrance to Sperryville,
Okay.
there's a huge array of solar, okay? And we all know Phil Irwin was the founder, I believe, of the Rappahannock League for Environmental Protection. He put solar at Caledonia Farm, and he said he realized benefits from it soon after, so he was very happy with solar. So that's just a small part of solar that is in our county already. And then I wanted to talk about, when you say development, it's a scary word. People go nuts without understanding different aspects of development. So when you say solar farm, it can be like, oh my gosh, there was a thing down in Bealton was hundreds of acres, was a solar farm. Somebody, I think it was Al Henry, told me about Sperryville. So my husband and I went to Mountain Jackson and saw the solar farm there. Well, it's several hundred acres. Solar is not a one-size-fits-all. It's sort of like our broadband. One of the things the discussions was shielding it from a view. So I went down 211 toward Warrenton, and I took a picture. These are Leland cypress. And so that's a really positive way to do some screening. because Leland cypress, white pine grows big and they're huge, enormous, and then the trunks are then exposed as they get bigger. These things just stay thick all the way down and provide a screen. So there are solar companies, and okay, at one of the last meetings, Bill Fletcher was talking about the plight of farmers and agriculture. It's very difficult for farmers to be able to keep on their farming. So there might be opportunities here. There are some companies that only take 20 to 40 acres of solar if it's appropriate with access to electrical facilities and things like that. So that might be an opportunity for farmers in a small way to be able to, it's like the cell towers, when they went up, it was on like the Miller's property and some others. That's an income for them from the cell towers. This might be another way without the vast expanse of, oh my gosh, hundreds of thousands of acres of solar farms here. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sheila.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, and all the Board of Supervisors members, Mr. Curry. Well, I'm here to follow up on something that's very dear and near to my heart. Woodward Road, the unsafe conditions on Woodward Road. No, I'm not a member of the Spurwell Coalition that y'all listen to very intently, and whether you want to admit it or not, y'all use some of their comments in your analysis that you use to turn down Mount Airy project. Enough about Mount Airy project. It's done. Y'all sealed the fate of that. Enough of that. But I wrote each of you an email on July the 20th asking for your help to do something about the unsafe conditions on Woodward Road. I've not heard anything back really, other than Miss Smith you did mention today about the Hopewell Lane situation. And that was not truly represented here today. There's a different lay of the land out there today than it was maybe when Mr. Nesmith or some of his team members looked at. There's a different lay of the ground. But you don't seem like that. To me, y'all, I think y'all look at me like I'm a Lone Ranger. I'm not the Lone Ranger. Y'all got pounded with comments from the Spurwell Coalition. It was written in the papers and on Facebook, but they spoke up about all these unsafe conditions. But you know, it wasn't in their heart to do anything about the unsafe conditions. It was not in their heart. That was not their agenda. Their agenda was to use the information they gave y'all to deny Mount Airy project. Okay? You know, I don't see a one of them, or have y'all gotten any comments from them about doing something about the unsafe conditions on Woodward Road? I don't think so. Even you, Mr. Parrish, you spoke up and said that you owned a home at one time on Woodward Road and about the unsafe conditions. I've not heard anybody saying that they want to step up now and do something to help us. You know, y'all on record in the papers, in my email, if something unsafe happens out there and someone gets killed, God forbid it happens, but it could happen. Y'all on record that y'all can't deny that you was ever told about this. Now, you know, and I think probably in the back of the mind, I can't speak for the Spurwell Coalition, but I think the Spurwell Coalition may be coming forward sometime in the near future. They want to abandon State Route 600 Woodward Road. They want to turn it back into a walking path, their bicycle riding path, and the horse trails. I think that's what they really want. They weren't concerned about it, because most of them don't even live on Woodward Road. They don't even live on Woodward Road. So, again, I ask for your help. And no, I'm not the Lone Ranger, but I would appreciate any help that y'all could give in getting these unsafe conditions. And I know There's more than what I put in my email, but I ask for your help. Thank you for giving me the time to speak.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Atkins.
I'm Carolyn Butler. I live just off Woodward Road in Sperryville. And for the past 4 years, I have been asking to have the safety of the intersection at Hopewell Lane and Woodward Road and the intersection of Woodward Road and Main Street to be corrected. Mr. Nesbitt spoke as if the problem was Hopewell Lane. That is not true. Hopewell has a wide mouth there. The problem is that Woodward Road has a right-of-way of 30 feet, but people have parked their cars there. They've taken it over as their front yard. They've built a porch there. That all needs to be cleared up. At both intersections, the view of oncoming traffic is blocked. It's blocked at Main Street. I have to look at a mirror in order to pull out. Well, I don't really trust that mirror. And then pulling out from Hopewell, it's blocked by a fence that's on state right-of-way. It's a solid board privacy fence. We cannot see through that fence. And they have a peach orchard that's overflowing the fence. The rock wall that's inside of the fence is actually the line, and the survey stakes are still there. You can go and look at it. Recently, an officer with the Sperryville Fire Department told me that their fire truck could not make the turn onto Hopewell Lane from Woodward Road. So there are 9 houses on Hopewell Lane plus a church. We pay the fire and levy tax, but we do not have the protection, putting our lives and our property in jeopardy. That makes me wonder if the house that was on my lot before I built my house, is that why it burnt to the ground when it's less than a mile from the fire department? It doesn't make sense. Last week, Mr. Randy Norris of VDOT was consulted about how to correct this hazardous situation. He stated that the fences, vehicles, and all the other stuff there need to be removed from the state right-of-way. And Woodward Road widened with gutters and culverts. The state is willing to do this, but they must be requested by the Board of Supervisors, the county administrator, or the zoning administrator to do it. So it's up to you all to get this done. You're putting so many people's lives in jeopardy. I mean, I plead with you to consider the safety and the well-being of the citizens. Give us the benefit of fire services before there is a catastrophe or loss of life. And it will fall on your head because this is going on record. I hope it's being filmed that we're asking you to do this. Many people have stated to this board in the past 6 months that Woodward Road is narrow, busy, and unsafe. Please ask VDOT to correct the issues by cleaning up the right-of-way and widening the road with gutters and culverts to make it safe for all. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to say one thing about the water. The Estes House and the Sandwich Shop House have dry wells right now. And the Woodward Mill just put in a well, and they say they may have enough water to flush the commodes. So I would suggest you not allow any other wells to be put on that stream that goes through there, the stream of water, especially something that's really not necessary, and that's coming up tonight.
Thank you. Anyone else? I do see we have some folks on Zoom. If anybody's would like to speak during public comment, please raise your Zoom hand and we'll recognize you. Nope. All right, not seeing any hands raised. I will close public comment. And the next agenda item is the consent agenda.
Madam Chair, if we could pull out accounts payable, please.
Okay.
Just a few quick questions there. I don't know if anyone else.
Any others?
If there's no other changes, I'd make a motion that we adopt the other items in the consent agenda.
I will second that motion.
We have a motion and a second after pulling accounts payable. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
3 questions. Mr. Curry tends to be at the ready with answers, so it shouldn't take too long. I noticed 3 relatively significant payments to these entities, and I just wanted to hear the background on them. Mannahoac 311, Diligent LLC, and then just to understand the check written to the health department, those 3 items.
Mannahoac 311 is the new owner of 311 Gay Street.
Okay.
The second one was
Diligent.
Diligent is board docs annual fee,
And what is that annual fee?
$13,000.
Wow.
And the payment to the health department is our quarterly payment.
That's okay. That's what I thought. Since you were an administrator in another locality, is this board doc subscription scaled at all to population or some other metric that?
Yes.
Okay, and $13,000. I'm trying to do the math. Is
well worth the price if you ask me.
Okay.
Is that
It's $2 per citizen.
Is that cost at all shared with the schools, or do they pay for their own subscription?
Their subscription is actually through the state school board. They have a totally different setup.
So you, in your past position, you were paying a lot more than $13,000.
Well, I didn't have board docs there. I had it at a regional jail, but there we had a NeoGov, which was
okay.
Different and more.
Going back to Mannahoac 311, I know this is a payables discussion. Right, has anything changed in terms of our lease arrangement with the office space there, or is it just kind of continuing as it has been? And then the second part of that is, are we in a position to perhaps talk to the new owner about better utilization of the space or possible discussion of our lease agreement with them?
Nothing's changed. I don't think the building committee, I can speak for them, are interested in a long-term lease. And I'm sure discussions could be had, and of course had discussions with the new owners about potential upgrades for the facility, relocation of offices if that suited their needs. We don't know exactly what they want to do. So.
Okay, so maybe too soon to tell, but I hope we have those discussions, because if there's money to be saved or we can improve that space while we use it, it'd certainly be in everyone's interest. Okay, that's all I have. I would go ahead.
Kramer building?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so are they still month to month?
They're month to month.
I don't know if my colleagues have any payables questions, and if not, I would go ahead and move that we adopt the accounts payable and pay the bills.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I think we could save money on that space if we were willing to put in some temporary trailers until we got some other things in order.
Yeah.
I'm concerned, and I don't know that I want to talk about it in an open meeting a whole lot, but I'm concerned that we may have more money to spend there in the near future rather than less. So I really want to start asking a lot of questions, but I think trailers could be a good solution.
Well, we've spent about $250,000 over in that building since we went month to month.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
But
Well-
we've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But I don't think anybody's going to spend time on the trailer solution unless there's a consensus of the board to do so.
Yeah, we should talk about that. Okay.
Great. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. This moves us into appointments.
Would it be possible to take a
Sure.
5-minute break?
Take a 5-minute break. Thank you. All right, I think everybody's back. Well, I know everybody's back. We'll go into appointments. The first one is the Rappahannock County Water and Sewer Authority.
Board members are aware this was on your agenda last month, just as a preliminary notice. You have 2 terms that are expiring. That let's see, when did they expire? They expired at the end of last month, but those terms remain filled until their person is appointed to replace them. You have received several applications. They're attached. Mr. Haley, Mr. Sutton, Mr. Reed, Mr. Sharp, and then Mr. Seiler did apply, but just today sent an email stating that he wished to withdraw his application. So your two incumbents have submitted applications for reappointment, and then you've received 2 additional applications for appointment.
I think at the last meeting, we had requested an opinion as to whether or not Mr. Sharp could continue to serve as both on the BZA and on the Water and Sewer Authority.
I did see an email communication between Mr. Sharp and Mr. Goff earlier today. Mr. Goff promised that opinion within a week of this email today.
That's kind of a moot point because I talked to Mr. Sharp today and he said that he would like to be reappointed, and if it did turn out to be a conflict, he would resign from the BCA. So we're safe, we're safe to reappoint him if we see fit. He's got a lot of history on that board. And
So the 2 members whose terms are expiring would like to be reappointed?
That's correct.
I'll go ahead and make a motion that we can do it individually to reappoint Mr. Sharp to the Water and Sewer Board.
I will second your motion.
We have a motion and a second for Mr. Sharp. Any further discussion?
I would just, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I would just think that we would reappoint the 2 experienced members that we have and move on.
Well, and Mr. Haley is very willing to serve, and there are a lot of things going on at the Water and Sewer Authority right now. So I certainly do think it does make sense to keep the same 2 individuals on there for continuity. I also think it's, we're sort of in the same boat we were a year ago with the social services appointee, where I wonder if we have people that are willing to do the work, why don't we expand the authority?
Yeah.
And figure out a way for everyone to contribute, especially when there's so much going on. Because sometimes we don't have any applicants. Many times we've advertised for this and had no applicants, and now we have 4 good applicants without even advertising the vacancies, which is sort of mind-boggling. But I really do think that there's a lot of benefit to reappointing the 2 that are currently serving. And taking a look at expanding the authority.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I will note that I find myself in a tough spot because we have a great applicant in Mr. Ken Reed who has spot-on experience, and I said last time that we talked about this that my view is in a county our size with 2 wastewater treatment systems and virtually no communication between them doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And town of Washington's not gaining economies of scale that it could by working more closely with the county authority and vice versa. And then throw the schools in there, the schools' aging systems. I hope we maybe could expand the authority to include people who might take a more global view of how all this can be organized and operated under some kind of consolidated public utility that benefits taxpayers across the board, whether than the town of Washington, Sperryville, or the school system. And right now, to have these disparate systems with no communication and nobody on either body really talking to one another, I mean, there's certainly been recent efforts to do so, I think is a real missed opportunity, and I think it's a disservice for taxpayers. So if we did expand, I hope that we would all look at Mr. Reed's credentials, because I think he might be precisely the kind of person that could bridge that gap, or at least come up with some fresh ideas. But anyway, for the initial nomination, I will support Mr. Sharp.
No other discussion. We'll go forward with the motion for Mr. Sharp. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
And then I would make a motion that we reappoint the other individual that's also currently serving.
Andrew Haley.
Andrew Haley, that's correct. Thank you, Mr. Curry. I attended the most recent meeting of that body, and he's a really strong voice on the authority and brings a lot of common sense and is able to build consensus and move an agenda forward very skillfully. And I think he makes a great contribution on the authority.
I'd second that nomination. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I would just say that I really do think it is a good idea to expand the authority. If we have people willing to help us and do the work, it would be smart of us to allow them to do it.
Right.
So the sooner we can do that, the better.
We'll have to look at state code, see if that is allowed. Our local ordinance would have to be amended, but state code may prescribe the number. So we'll look at that.
And then if there's not an opportunity to do that in the way we currently have constructed, maybe we could put together a special working group.
Yeah.
Yep. Thinking it sounds like we need a strategic, focused
Yeah.
Group.
It's super important stuff, so let's just find a way to do it. And I mean, your points are really well taken.
I have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
The next agenda item is just a reminder that you still have 2 vacancies on your the Rappahannock County Recreational Facilities Authority.
It'd be a good place for people to start with, now that they're gonna have this fancy bathroom, you could start there and then graduate to the sewer authority.
Well, I don't know that anybody wants to graduate to the sewer authority per se. Don't let that deter you from serving on the Parks and Rec authority.
There are no
If you're interested.
applications at this time, so please continue to put the word out, and if the board would like me to advertise again, just let me know.
I think the advertisement might be a good idea. We're not getting anything through word of mouth. I don't know how the other board members feel.
That suits me fine.
And in particular, we don't have any representation from Wakefield or Jackson districts.
No one?
No one.
I'll have to get to work on it then.
So I'll take by consensus, because I didn't hear any objections, that you want me to put a notice in the paper.
Definitely won't hurt. And next is the appointment to Board of Building Appeals.
Still a vacancy in the Board of Building Appeals. So of course, this body is not needed, hasn't been needed since I've been here, and it's very rarely needed. But you do have a vacancy. I did talk to one individual who did not follow up with an application. It's been posted on the wall at the building office for a number of months. So if you know of any contractors or property managers or design professionals, send them my way.
All right, moving into old business.
We've added an
Oh,
agenda
that's
item
right. Thank you
F4
for the reminder.
Regarding the local Board of Social Services. The board recall that you adopted an ordinance to increase that body from 3 to 5. Really never set a path on how you wanted to go about doing that. And this is not one of the bodies that falls in your policy that I'm to automatically advertise in the paper. So if you would like me to place a notice in the paper, I can. I think it would be wise for the board to try to make appointments next month. Ms. Lang's term ends in October, and it would be good to have new people in place, overlapping her experience, so she's the longest serving member on that body. If you recall, I also recommended that the board consider one of your own to serve on that body. It is pretty standard for boards of supervisors to put a representative on the social services board, and the state code pretty much suggests that you do that, but you don't have to. So for that, if the board would like me to place a notice, just need to hear that, I will do it. Otherwise, I guess we can rely on word of mouth.
I would make a motion that you advertise for those positions.
I will second
We
that
had
motion.
at least one qualified individual that didn't get appointed last time. We have vacancies. Maybe they'd still be interested.
I'll reach out.
All right, we have a motion and a second to advertise. There's no further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you for
That's
that.
2 positions.
There's 2 positions. There was a 3-member body, now it's a 5-member body. So if you were to follow my recommendation, you'd be seeking 1 citizen that's not on the Board of Supervisors.
I think you should advertise for 2 positions.
advertise for
See if
3.
any of us answer.
Well, and might be another vacancy in October.
Oh, there will be, yes.
Yes.
All right, moving into old business, we have special exception number 21-03-02, Dowling Real Estate. Mr. Brown has asked if he could speak for a couple of minutes before we discuss.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Curry. We haven't had a chance to really address the board for the last couple of months, and I just had a couple of brief comments and then wanted to introduce the applicant, Mr. Dowling, who's here today. Just a couple of things I wanted to bring out that weren't readily apparent in the materials. First off, it's worth emphasizing that, again, that the BZA, this matter was before the BZA on the tourist home application itself back in May. The BZA approved the tourist home use for this structure, subject to the customary conditions that they usually impose, things like no food service at the residence, a maximum of 10 people in 5 rooms, that it would be rented only as a single unit. But of course, that approval was contingent upon the board, this body, removing the restriction that's in the special exception permit presently, which is that there be no commercial use of the structure. That is the matter that's before the board again today on a special exception amendment application. Those two applications were filed in parallel. And I know that Supervisor Frazier, I think, expressed some real frustration a couple of months ago at the idea that the BZA had it before them, before this board had it, you had it before you. And I simply wanted to comment that we discussed the matter with Mr. Curry, Mr. Goff, and that was the decision, that it was appropriate to file those two applications at the same time. And we followed the recommendation of Mr. Goff and Mr. Curry, and I wouldn't want any ill will or any thought that there was something to try and work around this board to be attributed to the applicant. If there's any of that needs to be placed, it needs to fall on me and Mr. Curry and Mr. Goff. What I think is not also readily apparent in the board's materials is relates to the other special exception application, that is the large Blue Rock application that was filed and was pending when you all had this before you a couple of months ago. Since that time, that application has been withdrawn completely by the applicant, Mr. Dowling. Based on the number of comments that were received, that you heard in your public hearing, it was based on that feedback, Mr. Dowling decided just to withdraw the application entirely. I think recognizing that was a large, complicated application, too much, too soon, and wanting to be sensitive to the neighbors and the citizens that expressed concern about that application. Mr. Dowling will speak to you in a moment. I think it's fair to say that his vision with the Blue Rock is to proceed slowly, proceed incrementally, reestablish the use that's already permitted under the existing permits, and be able to demonstrate that the Blue Rock can be a good neighbor and can be a good corporate citizen here in Rappahannock County. It's also worth observing that you all heard universally positive statements in support from the public this afternoon in support of this removing the commercial use restriction in connection with this tourist home application. That suggests that, again, the public comment that you heard a couple of months ago was related to the broader Blue Rock application, concerns over that, and not about the specific tourist home use itself. Just to sum up, this is an ideal structure for a tourist home. I know that you all are certainly familiar with many of them that have been approved. I've sat in many meetings where they've come before the Planning Commission and the Board of Zoning Appeals. There are many tourist homes that have been approved for use in this county where they are on a narrow secondary road. They are isolated. This is not that structure. This is right off Route 211, a 4-lane primary highway. And it doesn't have a lot of those potentially negatives that some of those others that have been approved in the past have associated with them. So I hope that the board will consider favorably this request that you remove that no commercial use restriction. In short, I would hope that you would give Mr. Dowling a chance. Give him a chance to demonstrate, as I said a moment ago, that he can be a good neighbor, and that the Blue Rock can be a good corporate citizen and a real plus to the county. And with that, I'd like to introduce Mr. Dowling. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Supervisors, Mr. Curry, Mr. Goff, thank you. I'm grateful for your time today. I'm also grateful for the support of neighbors who spoke in favor. When I purchased Blue Rock, there was this half-built house on the property, and 25 years ago was the first time I came to Rappahannock County, and I actually stayed at Blue Rock, had dinner in the county, went to the parks, did that, and I realized what a beautiful place it was and a beautiful county it was. And so the opportunity to come back and spend time in Rappahannock is really part of the goal here. And when I saw that half-built house, I said, that'd be great to fix that back up, and that'd be a place where I can stay. So my goal, my purpose is that's where I'm going to stay when I come to visit the county, which I hope to do a lot of weekends and some longer trips and so forth. But I also I know that I'm not going to be able to stay there that often, maybe 4 or 5 times, 5 weeks a year, something like that, to pay for the expenses of upkeep and to maintain it and the mortgage and other things. It really is a perfect house to be as a tourist home. So that was my intent, and that remains my intent with it. I want to be very clear. We have no intention to use it as part of the inn. We won't be renting out the rooms as part of the inn. We won't be using it for inn events and things like that. It really will be used as a tourist home. The only connection of the inn is that it's on the same property, and we'll ensure that the inn management keeps it, takes care of it to make sure that it's well managed. And I think those are the two key things. So it's not going to be part of the inn's operations, but we're going to make sure, but it's on the same property, and that we'll make sure that it's well managed. So I did want to introduce Liz Carpenter here. Liz, you want to raise your hand, is our general manager, and as we hope to open soon, and Ben Liu, our head chef, sitting next to Liz, we hope to be a great contribution to this county. And one of the things that I realize is that I think it's important to really just focus on bringing the Blue Rock back to what this county has great affection for, which is what it's done for the last 30 years in terms of being a place that people can get a bite to eat, can come have a glass of wine on the terrace. People can come here and have an event. A lot of people have gotten married at Blue Rock and so forth. And that's really what I want to do, is bring it back and rejuvenate it to what's been very successful in this county for a long time. And so this is really the only thing we're asking for, is to be able to do some short-term rentals of this house when I'm not staying there. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Whitson, do you want to?
Well, I was just going to ask if county staff wanted to provide us any kind of overview or an update or how we got to where we are now.
Ms. Summers and I spoke just beforehand, and she asked, do you want me to keep it short? I said, yeah, real short. Wait for questions. I'll mention the fact that obviously 2 months ago this came before the board, and you had your public hearing, duly advertised public hearing, and pursuant to your local code, the Board of Supervisors must decide on special exceptions within 120 days of them first appearing on your agenda. So you do have a little bit of time, but not a lot, and based on the other special exception that was submitted, there was a thought that maybe this one should slow down and allow the other one to catch up. As you've just heard, that's been withdrawn, and so it's not before the body. There was a considerable concern expressed, I think, during the public hearing of creep of commercial further down the road. Of course, this parcel already is granted a special exception, multiple permits to have commercial events on the parcel. A particular house has a restriction that it must meet Department of Health requirements and have no commercial. To change a condition on a special exception
you're basically eliminating that special exception and replacing it with a new special exception with new conditions. And so the applicant has requested that the condition that states no commercial use be removed from the new permit. In listening to the discussion at your earlier meeting and the citizens, Ms. Summers and I thought that perhaps if the board was inclined to allow a tourist home, you may want to allow that, but no other commercial, and which may be an extension of whatever's happening at the Blue Rock, any events or anything like that. And so we crafted a condition in the staff report that you could use if you wanted to do that. As you're aware, your special exceptions should be considered after reviewing the requirements or the general conditions in 17052, the general standards, and as the special requirements further on back in the document, which are pretty new. They were included in the May amendments, and a lot of those were put into place because of impacts to neighbors on private roads and things like that. And so from that perspective, this application, the applicant and his counsel very clearly checked off all those boxes of the requirements in the May amendments to ensure that their application meets those standards. But your review of the general standards should still be considered. And it is the applicant's responsibility to show you that that's been done. And they submitted information to that end as well.
If I could, Madam Chair. So since Mr. Brown had mentioned my name, I was and still am a bit aggravated as to the process. I don't see how anyone can apply for something that they're specifically forbidden to have until that restriction has been corrected or lifted or whatever. So I still have a problem with that. And just because Mr. Curry and Mr. Goff suggested that that was the way to go doesn't mean I have to agree with them. And I don't. So that still is out there. And I don't know why this land use decision is being done at the 2 o'clock meeting when I think this is the first time we've ever done any land use decisions at a 2 o'clock meeting. And the courthouse had quite a few people, the neighbors, that were opposed to this tourist home application at the public hearing that was a 7 o'clock meeting. They're not here today. I don't know why. So I have a problem with that part of the process. And I think if we're going to do things, we should be consistent with our processing. And for some reason, we're not. I also have the same feeling now that I had back in 2002 or whenever it is first before the board. It was a special exception to build a house and that house only be used for residential use, not commercial use. And I believe this march toward from Little Washington to Sperryville or Sperryville to Little Washington, however direction you want to march, we're just allowing the commercial use to just keep growing. And that's why we have zones. That's why we have processes. And again, I don't think we're following it. I think we're going back to personalities. And I don't think it's a good thing. So I've got that out there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Ms. Smith? I agree 100% that we should not be doing this business at the 2 o'clock meeting. This business was done at the 7 o'clock meeting last time, and for sake of continuity, that's when people should expect to be able to look on the agenda to come back and conclude this business. I can't think of anything in my tenure on this board that we've done in regards to a land use decision or a follow-up to a public hearing that we've concluded at the 2 o'clock meeting. There's been, maybe not in writing, but sort of a prevailing idea by this board that we would do things that attracted a lot of public interest at 7 o'clock because some people are simply not allowed to attend the 2 o'clock meeting due to their work schedules or other obligations. I think that is a bad tradition to get away from.
Go ahead, Chris. Oh, well, I think that the initial restriction was aimed at, Mr. Harvey, because he was completely ignoring all the rules at the time. I think that frankly, I believe it's an appropriate use for that structure. And, whether or not it's connected with the Blue Rock, it's off the road, can't see it. It was just, it didn't make any sense to have a fallen down building there all those years. So I don't have a problem. I also don't have a problem with, putting like a time limit on it, for a review, later in case it would be some unforeseen, problem that would reveal itself over the next, year or whatever time period we put on it. So, I mean, there's B&Bs all over the county, and they're traditionally accepted, and this just seems like one more. And if we have to erase the restriction that was put on it to put the reins on one individual in the distant past, that's fine. That's fine with me.
Go ahead.
Okay. First of all, it's nice that you don't see Tyvek going down the road. Thank you for doing that. Stayed there when it was Joe's, and it was lovely, and the view and the venue is definitely one of the best in the county. I do believe the past is haunting that building to some degree, and understand the concerns of creep. I am interested in the comment about possibly only allowing it to be a tourist home, which to me, if that's something you agreed to, basically says that's what you want it to be, and there's no doubt. Leaving it as a commercial property, I think, opens it up to the unknown, and people don't like the unknown in Rappahannock County, and neither do I. Definitely it makes sense to have additional income. If I were you, I'd be trying to do the same thing, no doubt, going into a new business, even though it should be a popular one. So I would be open to the conversation, and I believe the adding that it's only allowed as a tourist home makes sense.
Since I'm chairing the planning commission this year, I've already expressed some of my views on this, but just to summarize, I mean, first of all, I've never been a fan of tourist homes. I think tourist homes generally are really starting to have an effect on this question that keeps coming up about affordable housing. I think it's eroding I think the prevalence and the increase in tourist homes is having the effect of eroding our affordable housing base. I think it's been fixed, I've said many times, to some extent by the minimum acreage of 10 acres in ag and 20 in conservation, because we've gotten away from what I think used to be 2 acres in ag and 5 in conservation. When you see even these little houses come in at a relatively low price point, and somebody buy it, renovate it, turn it into a tourist home, and then that's out of inventory for normal, regular people to live there. So for the record, I just want to say I'm not a fan of tourist homes. I think it is a fallacy that they contribute significant revenue to the county. I keep trying to remember to go to the Revenue Commission and find out what the direct lodging tax revenue is from them. At one time, I think in the aggregate, it was somewhere around $10,000 total. I'm very sensitive to the fact that these tourist homes often often involve neighbors, and there's little or no ability of the county government, the zoning administrator, to really monitor any adverse effect on neighbors. So my starting point really is I just don't like them. I would agree with Ms. Donahue that the fact that building's now been finished and it's quite attractive, and we don't have to look at Tyvek anymore flapping in the wind, and that was for the better part of 15 years. That whole area of the county, I'd like to know how all of that happened, but it all did. And I think that there's a long history, not only of Blue Rock property, but property up above Clark Lane, and I want to be careful not to lump it all together and just have a sort of a pessimistic view of a very earnest effort on Mr. Dowling's part to do something with that property. From a revenue perspective, in terms of real property tax revenue, no doubt it's a benefit to have that house finished. I'm sensitive to my constituent, Miss Meyer. Lucy Ann Meyer lives adjacent to the property. No doubt she can see the building from where she lives. In terms of the special exception permit, I've been, and I don't know if Mr. Goff could help me in this regard, but I've been wrestling with the question, are tourist homes commercial, just in terms of the definition of a commercial use? And I'm not saying that as a potential workaround, but tourist homes typically are in ag or conservation districts that do not have commercial activity. And I don't know, Mr. Goff, is there an easy answer to that question?
Well, it's always been my opinion that the home that charges for rooms
Okay.
is commercial. I mean, it's not residential because there's not a family living there leasing it for a long term, or a family that owns it that's living there. So I think it would have to be classified just as an ordinary English language application, as something that's commercial in nature.
Okay. But certainly it's on the lower end of the intensity spectrum if you look at the continuum of potential commercial uses. So there's that. I appreciate this notion of you want to be a good citizen and a good neighbor. And I think if I was to support this, I would want some kind of review. And I hate to stack up all these reviews because we then have to remember to conduct a review. But right now, my concern is the adjacent neighbor. The good news is it's a dedicated driveway off of a state highway, single driveway, setback from the road, sufficient land buffer. But we did hear at the public hearing that was held related to this, a lot of opposition, including from the immediate neighbor. So I'm trying to wrestle with if I did want to support this, how to craft it in such a way that Mr. Dowling would in fact have an opportunity to demonstrate that he is a good citizen and good neighbor. And it is encouraging to hear that you'll be using it as your own residence. That kind of takes the edge off a bit for me. I mean, if it's 5 weeks, it's only 10% of the year, but it's more than nothing. So those are just my thoughts right now, and I don't know if anyone else has anything.
I do want to note that there really is no process to have a review in a defined period of time. You can have a time limit on the special exception. You can authorize through your local code the zoning administrator to extend that time limit. And I can't pull on the code section right now. I can look it up. But really what would be before you is to set us time certain rather than forever. Then the applicant would have to come back and apply again. And if something didn't go well, I suppose they may have a harder process to get approval. Now, it's reviewed somewhat continuously from a zoning perspective. And so if there are violations to the zoning ordinance, then you would go through a revocation process. But there would have to be clear zoning violations for that to happen. And
Okay.
this board's been through that.
Okay.
Well, the BCA has been through that.
So we could set a time limit at which time the applicant or the holder of the permit would have to come back and seek renewal.
The application would expire.
Okay. But that would be I guess it'd be
And they can decide whether they want to apply again or not.
It's a planning commission BZA route, correct?
No, this would be for the special exception.
Okay.
Which is allowing more than one dwelling on a
Oh, it's from
on a parcel.
the density
So what you're
angle.
deciding is whether more than one dwelling is allowed on that parcel. And BZA has already considered whether the structure is appropriate to be rented out in shorter than 30 days.
Did the BZA include in its conditions any time limit on the permit at all? Okay, so this is potentially a good way for our body to keep an eye on it. The one thing, and I'm probably foolish for showing my hand here, but you've talked about this broader, complicated plan for the Blue Rock property as a whole. The way I view this application, it potentially gives our body leverage in the future if you did come back, in my view, if you did come back and seek an expanded permit overall for the Blue Rock property as a whole, because, I mean, yeah, this is a standalone permit, a standalone use, but no doubt it's on the same property. And so to me, you should at least be aware that if we were to approve this, it potentially limits what you might be able to do later. And if I'm around when you come back, or if you come back, I will not forget that this is a pretty sizable property that, for whatever reason back in the day, was not to have any commercial use. So today, I can look at it in isolation and say, okay, it's a tourist home with a dedicated driveway. But tomorrow, in a broader context about the broader discussion about the Blue Rock property as a whole, I will not forget that you're operating rooms in that building, and that might very well limit what you can do as part of your broader plan. And I'm just saying that because I want that to be on the record, that I would definitely view this as part of a bigger plan in determining what would be allowed later, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
and you don't have to agree or disagree with me. I'm just saying that's how I look at it.
Want to be clear that the earlier conditions are on the structure as a second dwelling, as opposed to the parcel.
I understand. Yeah, I understand that, but I mean, just from a common sense perspective, if the applicant came back and said, well, now I want to expand I mean, they talked about it before about the number of rooms that are allowed on acreage of that number of acres, and I think we would have to pull this into account in determining what would be allowed under a broader plan for the property as a whole. So I think there's got to be a little give and take here. It's not necessarily you end up getting everything. I'm willing to look at this in isolation for now, but it will definitely inform future decisions if I'm around.
Could I make a suggestion that we revisit this application at the 7 p.m. meeting of the September Board of Supervisors? 7 p.m. I don't think we're getting anywhere today.
Of course, I set up the preliminary agenda for the chair to approve, and I can tell you my mindset for why it was 2 p.m. because the public input was done, and what was left to happen was board deliberation. So you did hear from some people in public comment today. That was not part of the public hearing. Whether that influences you or not, I don't know. But you can, as I noted earlier, you have a 120-day deadline. I'm sure September 1st is well within that. And that certainly is an option to you.
I would put forth a motion to table this. And we could table it to a time, definitely we could do it to the September evening meeting if that's okay.
We have a motion to table.
Second.
Motion and a second discussion.
I mean, I don't know what else we're gonna learn. We had the hearing, we had the, all the public comment in the hearing. I've consequently talked to some of the people that spoke against it, at the public hearing. And, they've, loosened up their opposition, against it. So I don't really, we can't have another, public hearing.
No, but see, you seem to have information now that we didn't have.
Well, I just talked to people that had spoke up at our public hearing.
But they're on the record as being opposed to it.
Yeah, but they changed their mind.
They're not on the record as saying that.
They're not on the record as being.
Well, they'll never be on the record as saying that because we can't have another public hearing.
They could come back for public comment, or they could have sent an email to say, I've dropped my opposition to this application.
This is a problem. This is a problem that we seem to be running into a lot lately. When one or more supervisors has information that the others don't, how can we make a rational decision? Would you like that if I all of a sudden did that to you?
I didn't.
I mean, seriously. Just think about it objectively.
Yeah.
Just take our personalities out of it, take the jurisdictions out of it.
Right.
It doesn't look good.
Yeah.
And that's, we're doing something at 2 o'clock meeting instead of the 7 o'clock meeting. And I just think, we don't have to advertise it. It won't be a public hearing, but at least the public would have an opportunity to come.
Okay. I mean, I don't think it's gonna make any difference, but it's just one more delay. One more exercise.
Well, maybe with another delay, maybe the applicant will withdraw this one too.
I mean, it's possible, right?
Jedi mind tricks there.
I'm just,
Oh, boy.
you
I
never
mean, is there
know.
anything that we don't know now that we will know in a month from now?
I don't know, we just found out something, I just found out something just 2 minutes ago that I didn't know.
Do we have a second to the motion?
You was second.
Okay, good, thank you, I thought I did, but I was.
Still discussion.
I would say that my recollection of the opposition to this application was that people felt that the applicant purchased that property with these conditions on it, and those are the conditions under which it should function. I don't see where that would change. I don't have anything against the applicant, I don't have anything against Airbnbs. I think the Blue Rock is a wonderful property. I have many fond memories there myself and look forward to visiting it in the near future. However, I don't see folks changing their mind, and if they did, I would kind of like to hear it from them.
I mean, it's on the agenda. I mean, it's on our meeting agenda for today.
Well, it's your district, it's your call, Mr.
It's
Whitson.
just a motion to table, it's,
We have a motion and a second. Ready for a vote? Any further discussion? All those, is this a roll call?
No.
All those in favor of tabling, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
I'll put forward a motion that we amend, just give me a minute here. Would it be no, it's a new, is it a?
The new, you are considering SC 210302, it's a new, which would replace earlier.
So I make a motion that we approve special exception permit 21-03-02. This is authorizing more than one dwelling on a lot and modifying, not removing, but modifying the language regarding no commercial use to read except for use as a short-term rental or tourist home.
So it'd be cleanest if we just state what the condition is, not modifying anything else.
Okay, the condition is, I guess the language is except for use of the dwelling.
So the staff recommended condition, if this is where you're going, is that commercial uses within the second dwelling structure are prohibited except for the use as a tourist
Got it.
home,
I'm
which
in the
use
staff
may
report.
occur with a valid tourist home special use permit. That I don't want there to be any confusion in the future for the zoning.
Okay, so special exception, tell me if this works, special exception number 21-03-02, condition, commercial uses within the second dwelling structure are prohibited except for the use of the dwelling as a tourist home, which use may occur with a valid tourist home special use permit.
And staff prefers that you would also include the requirement to comply with state and local laws and ordinances, that while that's naturally required, it helps us if there is a revocation process, that it is a condition.
And in addition, compliance with all state and local ordinances is part 2. And then part 3 is the special exception permit has a time limit of 2 years. 2 years from August 2nd, 2021. And that hopefully gives us some protection and some accountability for Mr. Dowling and an opportunity for the neighbors to observe how it goes forward in terms of adverse effect on them, if any.
All right, do you have the motion, Mr. Curry? Clearly? Okay.
It's 3 parts. 2, I think 2 of those you could easily take from your from the staff report. And the
2 years from this meeting.
Okay.
It's 2-year time limit.
All right.
Okay, we have a motion.
So after 2 years, he's got to come back and reapply all over again?
His permission to use the second dwelling to have a second dwelling on the property ends.
After 2 years.
Yeah, it's kind of problematic in that it exists.
Say that again.
The second dwelling exists, so it's problematic to.
It's the use of the second dwelling. Right?
I think that linking the 2 years would probably be better applied to
the use of the tourist home.
The use of the tourist home.
Yeah, I guess that's what I intended, and I didn't articulate it well.
Could we continue this to the end of the evening meeting? I mean, the sheriff's been waiting very patiently.
We're
We
really
have some
close
other
to
members
finish.
of the public waiting very patiently.
I think we're really close to having the finish motion.
Just if there's
Do
any
you wanna
doubt that
reread
we
it?
would have an opportunity during the break to work on it.
What I believe the conditions, as I understand them, are compliance with all state and local laws and ordinances, and that the commercial uses within the second dwelling structure are prohibited except for the use of the dwelling unit as a tourist home, which use may occur with a valid tourist home special use permit.
With that allowed use, placed under a 2-year time limit with a start date of August 2nd, 2021. It has to be tied to that. And I can work on, if we want to work on it, I can work on some language to help you, and we can just move it to tonight. It doesn't matter to me. If you're comfortable with the 3 conditions.
Well, it's 2 conditions.
It's 3.
Well, the one regarding the prohibition of the allowance. So commercial uses within the second dwelling structure are prohibited, except during the next 2 years from August 2nd, 2021.
That's a good
the
way to
use
go.
as a tourist home may occur with a valid tourist home special use permit.
Yeah, you embedded the time limit within that. And then the second is the requirement to follow all state and local regulations, correct?
Yes.
We have a motion.
And Mr. Goff, do you agree that that's a way to craft it with the time limit embedded within the?
Sunset embedded with the use.
Okay.
All right, is that a motion then?
Yeah.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Abstain.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, could I make a motion that we reorder the agenda to hear from the sheriff next, the new business item H1, mobile data terminal equipment funding, and then after that to also move up item H5, the approval location of historical marker at Scrabble School.
I'll second that.
We've got a motion and a second. Moving up H1 to now and H5 to follow it, and then go back to the regular order of G2 and G3.
Correct.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to reorder. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
I'm going to abstain. I was distracted, so sorry.
Okay. All right, so mobile data terminal equipment funding. Sheriff Compton.
I can assure you I will not take that one.
With the guns and everything, we should just reorder the agenda and let you go before everyone.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm here to talk about as I refer to them as MDTs. They're basically computers in the cars for the deputies. And what that does is it will shorten the time for a traffic stop. I've asked for funds to be able to purchase scanners and printers that will also be put in the cars. So if they make a traffic stop, when they scan the driver's license, scan the registration, it automatically will input that into the computer for them. And they'll only have limited data that they will need to input. Along with the MDTs, it takes some of the stress off of the dispatchers, because while they're inputting that into the computers in the office, they can actually send that to the patrol guys. They can pull that up on the screens and they can actually respond to those calls. In dispatch, there's a map in the dispatchers, because of the vehicle locator that will be in that system. They will be able to tell where the deputies are. Lieutenant Dawson, we tried that out with him. I put one in his car. I actually borrowed one from Culpeper. He was responding to a call. When he was responding to the call, the road forked. The dispatcher could actually see him on the map and told him which direction in the fork to take, which helped him to respond and get to the call quicker, because he was at a standstill and didn't know which way to go. So that will help out with that. If one of the deputies are out here, they get into an altercation with someone, the dispatcher knows where they're at. If they move that vehicle at any point in time, we'll be able to locate that vehicle. The deputies will be able to run their own tags, run their own driver's license information, which will take that off of the dispatcher. So there's a lot of things that we get that the MDTs will help out with. Something that we've all been tasked with recently is the community policing data. I can tell you that takes Lieutenant Dawson several hours to sit in front of his computer and flip pages and input that information to send to the state police. With this, the deputies can now automatically input that. It goes to him and he sends it to the state police where that information is retained. So I'm asking for the funds to be able to purchase this equipment to put in the patrol cars. And that's it. If you want to hear from Lieutenant Jenkins or Lieutenant Dawson, they're both here. Lieutenant Jenkins is in charge of my VSIN terminal, which is where we run all our tags and our criminal histories and information. And she's in charge of that. And Lieutenant Dawson is in charge of patrol, and actually used the MDT as a trial period, which actually worked great here in the county.
Thank you.
Connie, question, this isn't really new technology. I mean, you
No.
could use this a while back.
Right, everybody around us is using this. The state police are actually using the same thing here in the county. They report all their traffic accidents. They do their reports. And what this basically will do, it will help to keep the patrol guys out in the patrol instead of having to come to the office to do their reports, which pulls them off of the road. I have deputies that have to stay over an hour or 2 hours over their shift sometimes to do their reports, because they're required to do their reports in a certain period of time. So I'm having to pay overtime in order to get those reports updated, because depending on what the case is, we have to get that to Mr. Goff in a timely fashion.
Sounds like a great way to modernize and streamline processes at the department.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Curry, what kind of action do you need from the board to move this forward?
Right, and so noted financially in the narrative here that this would be funded from your general fund balance, and those dollars, you recall you have cash sitting there that was freed up by the use of public safety payroll to cover some of our CARES Act obligation. That was $348,000, and so this request for $103,000 is much less than that public safety payroll that helped you retain some of that cash to be put to use for something else that may or may not totally fit within the CARES requirement. There's another about $10,000 in recurring costs for the maintenance on the CAD software and then the T-Mobile air cards that will connect the vehicles live. And you just adopted last month the e-summons fund, and so that will kick off of probably about $10,000 a month and will cover the costs of those services. So, long way to get to your answer. Because these purchases exceed $10,000, I'll need the board to make those awards. contingent on me as purchasing agent confirming that they're on state contract or they're proprietary or whatever to make sure we meet the procurement law. And the other is to approve the attached supplemental appropriation to move that $103,000 from the general fund balance into a line in the capital fund.
I would make a motion that we allow you to move this forward as you spelled out, and also adopt the appropriation documents as included in the packet.
Could he
I'll second.
repeat that?
I was going to ask him to, but I didn't want to steal your line.
We have a motion and a second discussion.
Yeah, Mr. Curry, this is really just, I can't understand a sentence here in the summary in our packet, which relates to the public safety payroll issue and the CARES Act money. So the sentence reads, funding is shown from the general fund, but is supported by cash budget freed up by allocating $348,402 of public safety payroll to cover CARES Act obligations. So that doesn't make sense to me, and maybe I'm being dense, but after 348,402 should the word be to? By allocating that amount of money to public safety payroll?
No, perhaps. The guidelines and the documentation for CARES stated that there's a presumption that all of your public safety payroll was that you paid during the CARES period was related to COVID-19. And you didn't have to go in and parse out which parts of their job took longer or whatever. There's just a presumption.
Right.
And so we had to show the state and feds that we used all 1.2 million or whatever it was in an appropriate way. One of the appropriate ways was public safety payroll. Right. And by doing that, we essentially kept the cash in our bank. So you could use it at a later time, and this is a later time.
So we allocated $348,402 of CARES Act money to public safety payroll, which had the effect of covering our near-term CARES Act obligations. Is that what it's meant to say?
Yes.
Okay, now I got it. All right, because I was reading it, it sounded the reverse of what I thought we did. And sorry, Sheriff, that has nothing to do with your request. I just want to make sure I understand the math. So, okay, that's all.
The only thing I have is something we talked about, which is, do you have 15 vehicles and deputies to use them immediately? And then how much is technology going to change on you if you don't?
I would need the 15. That puts one in my car down to the last person and one part-time person.
So you're really there now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And anything I need in the future,
Yep.
I can purchase through budget.
Right, one at a time as you grow.
Yeah.
Hopefully you don't have to grow too much. All right, any other discussion? We have a motion and a second to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You safe out there. Thank you.
Thanks, Cody. Thanks, Jane.
All right, next we moved up the location of the historical marker at Scrabble School.
Yes, I'll just give a brief introduction. We have a couple representatives here from the foundation as well. Scrabble School Preservation Foundation. I was approached regarding the placement of a highway marker at Scrabble School to recognize the history of that Rosenwald school. And basically what I told them was, if it's in the right of way, I'm all for it, let's do it. But if it's not, we need to talk to the board. And the DHR came out and looked at the site and identified a location that they thought was appropriate for the marker. It is not in the right of way, and before there was any approval granted, I wanted to make sure the board was aware and could see where that stake was driven and the location. So putting on the televisions a copy of where the stake and the sign are located. Individuals here can speak more to the overall project and what the sign, they don't know exactly what the sign will say. There's a draft included on the agenda item, but that will have to be reviewed and approved by the state before before the sign is erected.
And we have a Rosenwald school over in Piedmont already that does have a sign, so I assume it would be somewhat in line with that, right?
You can see what is attached.
Yeah, okay.
I have no creative involvement of the wording of the sign. I mean, of course, there were thousands of Rosenwald schools across the South.
Right.
And we're fortunate to have the history of this one be such that it's been restored, which is great. My former locality restored one as well, and it's great when you can find a reuse.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Nan Butler Roberts, and I'm the president of Scrabble School Preservation Foundation. I have with me Mr. Brian Patterson, who's also one of our board members, and he's done most of the work. So we'll give him a hand on that. And so we just, if you have any questions in reference to the Scrabble School and the foundation and what we do, if you'd like to come visit us, we'd love for you to come visit us. But we thought this was an appropriate step in reference to Scrabble School's history and their legacy, and definitely we want this this legacy to continue because of what Scrabble has meant to so many people over the years, down through the years. And so certainly this is, as I said, a great step for us. And we look forward to you coming to visit, and we look forward to having an event, hopefully when the sign is erected, and a grand unveiling and all those kinds of things that we have planned for it as well.
It's really cool.
I entertain any questions. Thank you for this time to our president and to our chairperson and to Mr. Curry and the rest of the board.
Thanks, man.
Is this sign that you envision, will it look like the other historical markers all
Yes, sir.
up and
Yes,
down the
sir.
highways?
Definitely.
And normally, I guess those signs are in the right of way, but that's a bad road to have a sign for people to stop and read. So I guess that's why it's going to be off the road a little bit.
That's correct. That's correct.
And, you know, the VDOT and DHR do like to have these signs. I went through the process a few times in places where people can pull off and actually read them.
Yeah.
And so there's nowhere on Scrabble Road where you can do that. And I suspect that's why they recommended it be basically placed in the front yard. You can pull up into the driveway of the school and read that sign.
We do have plenty of space there, so we're making this accommodation in reference to having a pull-off area so people can come and read about the history of the school. It is the oldest Rosenwald, I don't know if you know that, in the county.
Didn't know that.
There were 4 built, and this was the first one in 1921. So the rest came after that, and this is the one that has been fully restored. If you recall, many years ago, when integration came in Rappahannock, it was closed, all the Rosenwalds were closed, and this one was used as a county dump. And so over the years, it came into some disrepair, but they were built solidly, most of the Rosenwalds, and the needed some work and some renovation. And of course, now it's used at the Rappahannock County senior citizens. Senior citizens come there for their Monday through Thursday. They're there for their program and for their meals that they have during the midday. And then on other occasions, there are other events that Scrabble School Preservation Foundation is responsible for. In fact, next week, I have someone who has asked to come and have their own tour there. So we'll be entertaining them for part of the day on Saturday.
Thank you, Ms. Butler-Roberts. I don't know if anybody else on the board has any questions. I just think it's a great idea. And when I read this agenda item, I thought about John McCarthy's exit interview in the newspaper. And his one regret was that he hadn't refurbished the Scrabble School sooner and made it the community asset that it is today. And knowing what a great asset that it is, and knowing how much my grandmother enjoyed going there when she was a senior, and enjoyed the programs that were put on there and the opportunity to interact with her peers at the senior center. And don't sleep on the senior center breakfast when that comes back around either. That is a true treat. And it's a wonderful building and has such a rich history. I just think we should do this without any question, and I'd make a motion that we go ahead and approve for Mr. Curry to move this forward and to execute the MOA, the Memorandum of Agreement, as it's included in the agenda today.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Thank you for bringing this to our attention.
Yep, and sorry to keep you waiting so long.
Yes.
Well, it was interesting
Good word.
Well, I mean, that's pretty gracious.
and educational.
You're like, I've had enough local government for the year, right? Yeah.
All
For a
right,
lifetime.
closed discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much.
Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you.
Look
We
forward to
appreciate
seeing
It's
you.
good to see you, Brian.
Appreciate you all you
Thanks,
do.
Tina.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
All right, let me see. Now we're on to G2, short tower for broadband or public safety.
The board held this public hearing at an earlier meeting. After it was duly advertised, you heard from the public, and you decided to push off a decision to a later time. This is a later time. So staff can take any input you have, reshape the ordinance, and go back out to public hearing, or you can deliberate and potentially adopt the ordinance as presented or very slightly modified to be in keeping with the advertised intent.
I mean, I think the planning commission did a decent job in adding some, I guess, more than anything, visual production language to the draft ordinance that has now been circulating for some time. For discussion, I'll go ahead and put forward a motion that we adopt the this latest version of this ordinance, allowing 80-foot short towers. And I apologize, I don't have specific action language at the ready, but I could pull that up if it would help.
That would be adopt the ordinance as presented, I guess, if that's your intent.
Yeah, that's my intent.
We have a motion.
I'm a little fearful of it, but I'll second it.
A motion and a second. Discussion? Ms. Smith, I remember, I think in our previous meeting, you had some concerns.
I just wonder, I mean, I think it would be a good thing to go ahead and get on the books, but I wonder if it wouldn't benefit from some more details like is lot size, setbacks, those sorts of things.
The setback included right now is based on the 110% of the height of the tower unless the neighbor says they're okay with something less.
Okay.
Now, properties change hands, and so there could be a long-term concern. An 80-foot tower just really doesn't pose as much risk as a large tower from as far as a collapse. There was some comments during the public hearing about whether the board may want to consider including some sort of process to alert neighbors. I think I feel that probably goes beyond what was advertised. But that's something you could easily add to an ordinance in the future, adding another paragraph or section that when such an application comes in, the zoning administrator must notify the adjacent landowners
And then they have 30
and then they
days
have
to
X number of
respond.
days to respond or something like that.
Just to visualize, 80 feet would be roughly twice the height of this building?
It's generally, if you look around, it's more or less treetop in this area.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I don't know how else we would get companies like Piedmont Broadband to expand service and others, and I can't imagine anybody. I can't. You just can't predict what would happen. But could somebody just erect one of these just for the hell of it?
No, it has to be for broadband or public safety.
Yeah.
And I think the commercial aspect, the financial aspect of this is somewhat of a break. Most reasonable people aren't going to install 5 of these if one will do.
Right.
And every parcel down the road is not likely to have one if one will do. Now, remember also, this includes a requirement that they can't be located within 1,000 feet of a primary highway, which is your main view shed areas.
Yeah.
Secondary, it could be closer.
I think the public safety.
Primary highways are restricted to 231, 522, 211.
Yes.
That's it.
Yep.
Yeah, the public safety aspect of it is what comes to mind immediately. I mean,
Yep.
as we're talking about pagers and radios, and if we can just give some better options for infrastructure that doesn't screw up our scenic county, then I think this would be it for all the discussion we've had about how these would fit based on their height, largely within a tree line, and be disguised and painted yuma green.
Right.
I think it talks about a non-reflective neutral color that would be, subject to the zoning administrator.
Yuma.
So if somebody wants one of these, they got to come to us to get it? Or
No,
they
so
can just put it up?
this is the big difference. If somebody wants one of these, they have to go apply for a zoning permit with the zoning administrator. The zoning administrator is going to review the application against the ordinance, and if they check all the boxes, and it is neutral color, et cetera, and right setbacks and all those things, then it's approved, just like a residential home is approved.
Okay.
As opposed to a 199-foot tower has to go through several public hearings.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, it should be said that the state requires you to have a administrative process for towers under 50 feet that are along the utility. That's
Because of utilities.
well, it's just the new. That was in the tower rules that changed that we talked about when the Scrabble Tower was going through, and there's a whole package of rules, and that was one. Administratively approvable projects, and you just have to have an approvable process.
Okay.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any
So
opposed?
this should be a roll call.
Should be a roll
just to
call,
be
all right.
clear.
Mr. Frazier?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Whitson?
Aye.
Mr. Parrish?
Aye.
And I also. All right, next is the Broadband Authority Administration funding.
This was another supplemental appropriation, but it was of a magnitude that I didn't want to bury it into the consent agenda, and I just pulled it out separately to make sure that there was, figuring that it would get pulled anyway. But as the Board of Supervisors may be aware, the Broadband Authority, I believe, recommended that the Board of Supervisors appropriate $50,000 to match another $50,000 from the Path Foundation and a third $50,000 from a local donor. And that would provide $150,000 in the Broadband Authority's bank account to do administrative functions like pay for legal counsel. So this is a payment, the request is a supplemental appropriation from the general fund to your Board of Supervisors budget line item that already exists for the broadband initiative. And so from there, Ms. Nick would transfer the money off to the Broadband Authority.
So it's a two-step, one's an internal appropriation, moving from one general ledger line to another, and then ultimately to an outside authority?
Right,
Is that-
so you
okay.
would be adding the money to the fiscal year 22 budget, and then basically transferring the money off to the other entity.
Okay, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we appropriate $50,000 to the broadband initiative budget line item for the current fiscal year, and subsequently transfer those funds to the checking account of the Rappahannock County Broadband Authority. Did that cover it?
Mm-hmm.
Well done.
I've not been doing well today on motions, so I'm glad I finally got one right.
We have a motion. I'll second it. Motion and a second. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. Let's see. Did that one. Rolling right along. New business. Rappahannock County EMS agency actions.
And Mr. Polster apologized, but I'm going to pinch hit for him. He had an opportunity to travel up to Maryland to visit with an agency there to hopefully gather some good information for us, and I encouraged him to move along and allow me to pass along. So he did send me a few notes, and I wanted an opportunity to make sure the board knew where he was moving. He actually wanted a resolution to be on the agenda this month, and I told him I didn't think we were there yet. We weren't quite ready. So Mr. Goff and myself and Mr. Polster will be working on that over the next month, and you should see it, that or perhaps an ordinance amendment request next month. But he's working with the Virginia Department of Health Office of Emergency Medical Services, OEMS. That's the group that funded the $160,000 grant for the radios earlier. That's a group that also funds many other EMS requirements. They also are the regulating agency. And so he's been working with them to determine the requirements that the county will have to take to become a licensed EMS agency. So we'll have the 6 EMS agencies that are independent volunteer companies, and then the county will then be a 7th. So as part of that, there will be either resolutions or ordinances to take care of that to facilitate the chase vehicle. He reiterated his continued tour of all of the 6 EMS agencies that we have to discuss with them to understand best how he will implement this new program. And he's seeking best he can to work with Lieutenant Jenkins to pull data out of CAD to objectively drive some of those decisions. And he told you last month, I believe, trying to understand whether the unit should be located permanently at Company 1, or should it roam based on the time of day or time of week or time of month based on data and where calls tend to be. And lastly, we've basically determined that the vehicles we have in the fleet right now are adequate to get us started. We have the emergency management vehicle that is assigned to him. We also have the Tahoe that was previously used by the 911 coordinator. He's seeking multiple quotes to letter and stripe and light the 911 coordinator Tahoe. And after talking with all the different providers and thinking, he's recommending that we go with a blue-yellow color scheme to mimic our high school colors, our school colors, and not really step on the toes of our existing agencies. We want to be distinct and not have confusion that we are one of those volunteer agencies. So that's the recommendation there. And so those approvals will likely all fall within my purchasing authorities. And so we're getting the necessary quotes to get the vehicles striped up and all that. There will be several other purchases that will be required, the life pack things to do automatic CPR and all those things. I don't really know what they are, but unfortunately Mr. Polster does, and he's working on understanding of those costs. We will be working with our partners to see where we can share costs, such as with PATH and others, so that we can preserve some of the capital money that the board set aside for some other need down the line.
Did y'all consider the offer from Company 4 of an ambulance?
Well, that's not the recommendation that came out of the association and to the Public Safety Committee. So
But you're talking about putting the vehicle in other places, and that also didn't come out of that recommendation.
I don't recall the recommendation said Washington, as I recall. But no, we're not considering the ambulance. We couldn't staff the ambulance with one person. And we're staying on the track as directed to do a chase vehicle. That's what we were directed to do. That's what we were doing. Now, if the board wants to take up and vote differently to not do a chase vehicle and to staff an ambulance, then we will change course.
Any other discussion? Thank you. Poll book purchase award.
Yes, one second.
Electoral board.
The electoral board included in their budget, the FY22 budget request, $14,000 in a line that typically has $1,000 for equipment. And it was for new poll books, and I told them, and we discussed during the budget review, and including as a note in that line, that I requested they accelerate that to FY21 and use in-year funds to get that done. The selection process didn't allow that. It's really limited on where the electoral board can buy equipment and through what contracts because of the cybersecurity and all that. And speaking of that, the purchase of election supplies and equipment is specifically excluded from the VPPA, but it wouldn't be excluded from your purchasing ordinance. It would require you to make an award for anything more than $10,000. So what the electoral board has come forward with after reviewing with their local contractor, Mr. Yowell, is the attached proposal from Demtech, which is one of two companies that they can purchase from for poll book equipment. And you can see that it's $21,870. I told them this was going to be on the agenda, just to make sure they were fully aware. What this agenda does is request award of this purchase to Demtech, but it also includes a supplemental appropriation from your general fund balance to cover that cost.
Is this a time-sensitive matter?
I would think with November coming up, they would want these sooner than later.
I didn't get any correspondence from any members of the electoral board that I recall. Did anyone else?
So,
Of course, you know this stuff more than anyone.
Well, yeah, this whole process of elections is getting more and more complicated. And
there is a little memo that they did provide, and it's attached. So it can explain why they think that they're needed. I do think they're needed. I mean, obviously, these electronic poll books are take the place of the big books where you flip through, and
that's what they're still using.
No, I think they're trying to replace older computers, and what this tends, I believe this improves the election security from the standpoint of if you are an early voter or an absentee voter, then the system automatically knows that you've received an absentee ballot or you voted early, and it won't let you vote again. Or if it knows you received an absentee ballot, then you'll have to vote provisionally, and then they have to check after the fact whether there's two ballots for you, and they only count the provisional ballot if it proves out. When you do it by paper, it's next to impossible to do, and so I think everybody has to do these sorts of things with this equipment, poll book equipment. And of course, totally separate from the voting equipment. So this is when they check you in at the poll station.
Sounds like a good safeguard. So it's a two-part action for the supplemental appropriation.
You could bundle them into one action. I don't think you would do one without the other.
You have a Freudian slip, Gary. You said it's the general fund balance.
Fun, yeah, I saw that too. It is a fund balance.
Yeah.
The last thing we want to do is suggest that it's fun or funny money. It's money. Yeah, I saw that too. Sure.
You have a motion?
I was rushing to go on vacation.
I don't blame you.
You were looking to have some fun.
Let's take the two actions, the supplemental appropriation and then the funding of this purchase is included in the packet. It sounds like a good safeguard.
Take that as a motion?
Yes, ma'am.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Use of telefeed.
So was that together or separate? I'm sorry.
It's together.
It was together.
Okay.
Two steps.
You know I'm
I'm
efficient.
just, thank you.
Okay.
I'm great.
Okay. Use of telefeed VDOT funds for Holly Springs Road.
During previous discussions with VDOT, particularly during the secondary, six-year secondary road public hearing. There was discussion of the crash history at 211 Holly Springs, which is directly across from Weaver Road. And there's no turn lane. There's a short taper there. And I asked VDOT whether we could use some of the secondary road funds that are not unpaved road funds. They're telefee funds. Telefee funds are generated by easements along the right-of-way. And if you don't use them, they kind of pile up in past year funds. And so VDOT told me that we have $247,940 available from previous year funding, and that this project would cost approximately $120,000. But if the board wanted to do it, VDOT wanted a resolution clarifying that the board wanted to do it. So they ran that up the pole to Richmond, and Richmond said, yes, you can use these secondary road funds for a turn lane on a primary that's turning onto a secondary. And so if the board wants to do that, there's a resolution attached.
I put forth the motion that we approve this, and maybe we can get a second, some discussion.
Sure, I'll second your motion.
The road has a history, but for some reason, for several years, there weren't any problems there. Then all of a sudden, there seems to be a few problems. We get an email or a letter, and like a week later, there's a pretty bad accident there.
Yeah.
So
Where is this?
It's way over near the Culpeper County line.
So it's heading to Culpeper Warrenton. Instead of turning left to go on Weaver Road, you turn right, go on.
Wasn't that where Patty Hardy and Bill Freitag moved to? Didn't they move to Holly Springs?
Yeah, they defected to Culpeper County.
They're on the
But
Culpeper
it's,
side.
for some reason, for several years, there were no problems there, and then I think there's been 2 accidents, pretty close back to back. And it could affect anybody that's heading east on 211. There's proper sight distance there, but the problem is, I think some cars just come out too far.
So it's right across from the entrance to the dump.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, as Mr. Fraser stated, it's a long sight distance area, but that means people are going 60, 65 miles an hour and maybe not paying attention as much as they should because it's straight, and then the next thing you know, somebody's turning in front of them.
Yeah, what I try to do is, shift to the left lane whenever I go through there, just to try and give me enough room. There's another road right on down. It seems like I know 2 people that got T-boned there, but that's in Culpeper County, so we don't have anything to do with that one, but it's like it's a magnet for that type of accident.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Roll call.
Oh, roll call.
It's a resolution. That's
Sorry, I didn't see that. Mr. Fraser?
Aye.
Ms. Smith? Aye. Mr. Whitson?
Aye.
Mr. Parrish?
Aye.
And I also. Courthouse historic window restoration.
I think maybe, this is just a suggestion, but would you all like to conclude the rest of this
Sure.
business after the 7
Sounds good to
o'clock
me.
meeting?
Yeah. It's already, what time is it?
It's 5:30.
Yeah.
Yeah, if y'all,
Thank you
I had
for having mercy.
2 items on your board.
Well, this is all new business. Is that then your intent to?
Well, we don't have much left, do we?
Well, we got
3 items of
committee
new.
reports and different things, but I had matters presented by the board. I think at least one of them I should tell you all about before we go to 7 o'clock.
Let's see, can we see where we get before 6 o'clock? I know 6 o'clock is a good time to go get dinner.
Okay.
Courthouse historic window restoration.
This is an item that I brought to the building committee. This building, as well as the front of the 2 buildings next to us used by the Commissioner of Revenue and Treasurer, have these historic windows. We know that they're in need of refurbishment. Mr. Jenkins tried to reach out to several local contractors to see if they would come and refurbish them in place, and was unsuccessful. We did an online search and found a few companies that this is what they do, and basically received a couple proposals that exceed bidding thresholds, would have to put a bid out. But basically what this company in Lexington does, that has a lot of information, actually I have a binder here with their background, they will take the window sashes out, take them to their facility, steam them, take them completely apart, label everything, take them apart, and put them all back together, replace wood that needs to be replaced, replace all the glazing, repaint them, and then bring them back and put them back in. Of course, in the intervening time, the window frames would be painted. So between the two, you would end up with new windows, basically, and newly painted frames. But this is not a cheap endeavor, and so it is expected to exceed $40,000. And as I told the building committee, I understand that there is action desired to get some of these things done, and this is a way to get it done. And when the windows are taken out, they would put in a translucent kind of or what they call it, like a hollow core, like a sign material that has the hollow core type sign
So they're
material.
insulated like double pane?
They're a little insulated. You can't see through them, but they're translucent, and lets some light in. Of course, not a security issue because they're just as strong as windows, probably stronger. And it will take possibly 3 months to get all of this done. They would plan to come out, take them all out, take them with them, and then put them back in.
They're going to look the same?
They will look the same. They'll just be better. And actually, this door would be replaced completely. And it would be replaced to actually match the windows rather than almost match the windows.
And what do you say they're translucent? They're not clear to look through?
The material that's up there when the windows are gone is translucent.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
When they come back, we'll have double pane clear.
No, when they come back, it'll be the historical glass that's in
Single
there.
pane?
Same exact glass. They will put the glass back in. It's historically, these windows have probably been in existence since 1833.
Right.
Using very good hardwood, and so they will only replace what needs to be replaced, and they will put the wavy glass back into the same exact spot that the wavy glass is today. Yeah, so it's not an environmental improvement. We talked about potentially putting some interior storm windows, and the contractor was a little concerned about how that would come together. We have a sample one over in Commissioner Revenue.
And what's wrong with these windows now?
Well, you can see that the glazing is peeling out in many places, and they just need to be redone.
Like you could just take a little caulk and...
You could. One could do that. Most people are afraid to touch them. So I've spoken a lot. The building committee spoke about it, of which I'm no longer a member. So I've stolen their thunder. We have 3 members here, but the one in the audience is not going to talk, because you two might talk.
Hint, hint.
Well, we went over those plans quite a bit and looked at the scope of the work, and it's pricey, it is. But it's gonna be awful pricey to get somebody to come up here and work on them anyway.
So it's a place to start, so we're actually making progress, and it's part of the, people use that term envelope, or however you pronounce it, in the south, envelope.
Yeah, save the envelope.
So we're looking for a motion for
So
the IFP?
I don't want to put a bid out on the street if the board's disinclined to fund it.
Good point.
Yeah, I don't think, I can't see it. Furthermore, when they do the rest of the work on the building, is it not going to, it's not going to skew anything with the frames, right?
I don't believe so. I think the idea is to correct the roof and the windows and the walls, and then potentially look inward later. That, as Mr. Whitson said, the envelope, get that tight.
Well, we should get bids and see where we end up, I think.
I mean, as a member of the building committee, it's part of the envelope. It's, the mortar, the roof, and the windows were sort of our areas of concentration this year. And so this is the last of the 3 items on that checklist. It's very specialized. It's not going to be cheap. And if it is cheap, you will probably regret it later. And,
Is there anything in terms of the work that's contemplated that would fall into the category of these supply chain constraints that are affecting the supply of building materials? I mean, is this time frame really accurate?
We were not led to believe that there would be anything like this. You're talking about primer, paint, and the glazing, and a little bit of wood.
Okay, so it's not, it's really
Pallets.
restoration more than new materials.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
It's a labor-intensive process.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I'll defer to the building committee. So they're the ones that looked into it.
well, we don't know what we're looking at exactly until we put a bid out
Yeah,
there.
let's get
So,
it. I agree.
so I make a motion that we proceed to get a bid. Thank Mr. Curry for
Okay.
doing that.
I will second that motion authorizing staff to conduct necessary procurement actions and get bids for historical window restoration.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. How we doing?
It's like a day of new business.
REC Board of Directors proxy vote.
It's that time of year again. We received 4 or 5 ballots, that's what they're called, for the REC Board of Directors vote. And if the board would like them completed and submitted, I can do that. If you don't, I can do that. But if you want them completed, I need to know how to complete them.
Well, the whole process was rigged with REC.
There is one region, Region 8, actually, there is no incumbent, so that one's not rigged.
That one's exciting.
And for that reason, there's, I think, 4 or 5 people vying for the seat so that they can be seated and then be the incumbent.
I don't want to denigrate REC.
I don't know any of the individuals, and I haven't studied the matter and have no recommendation.
So what, we're in region what?
I
I'm
think
looking.
we're in Region 2.
3 we're not listed. Must be.
We're split between 1 and 2.
Can I just make a suggestion that this didn't work out so well last year, and maybe we should just not vote?
Yeah, let's don't participate.
That's
Doesn't
fine.
really matter.
Okay, thank you, that was easy. All right.
Good with that.
Thank you for
You don't need
putting
us
that
to
on the
vote to not
agenda,
to-
though.
Completeness. We at least-
Didn't want to presume.
Yep.
Yeah, you can toss it.
All right, Board of Supervisors, Policy 820.
I requested this be put on the agenda. I requested this be put on the agenda because last month,
Oh, gosh, yeah.
we sort of had a pileup of public hearings at the 8 o'clock, or 7 o'clock meeting, I apologize. And I didn't know, if the board would be willing to look at an option for a public hearing at the 2 o'clock. And if so, I would want it to be structured in such a way that it is not land use matters, that it would be
Oh, I see.
more like pro forma type things, like
Yeah.
the social services addition of 2 folks, or the
Ordinance
Mulkey, what was it?
Mulkey Mountain.
Mulkey Mountain
Agricultural
Forest.
Forestal District.
Yeah.
So you make a judgment about what's gonna draw a crowd, basically.
Well, and if you draw a big crowd at 2, you know you had an issue, but I think most of those going in, you have a pretty good feel for
Yeah.
how many people are going to show up.
Yep.
And especially the social services one, I was very troubled at the thought of having an employee on the road at that hour of the night,
I know.
and knowing that she commutes far away. That was, I really had an issue with that.
Yep.
And so I'm willing, I think that the Rules Committee should work on it if the board is of the same mind.
Sure.
We'll go ahead and start that work and
Sounds
come
like
up with something.
Good idea.
Based on the discussion earlier today, does the board want the Rules Committee to also include that land use matters have to be on the evening agenda?
Sure, consider that, I get it. I think it's not a bad point.
I mean, if there's an unwritten practice that people are going to be upset with if it's not followed, I'd rather be policy.
Yeah.
Correct.
I agree. All right,
You need a motion?
No, just do it through the
Discussion.
Rules Committee, maybe.
Yep. Rules Committee's on it.
Okay, is that it for
I think we've got the board committee reports and the matters presented by the board.
Can we do that at 7 o'clock? Oh, you wanted to?
Mr.
Well,
Frazier.
Yeah, I've got one. I was looking over the list of items that, as part of the package of the public hearing on the VDATs and company. And y'all might want to take a look at that ad that was ran.
What are we talking about?
Dennison Company Brewing LLC. He said, look at the ad.
Brandon, is this in here?
Yeah, it
It's
is.
the first item attached.
It says that the
Or the
public hearing
second.
will be conducted on Wednesday, August 2nd.
Does it?
No, I thought we.
I don't know.
I don't know, I didn't buy the paper that week, so.
It's a good catch.
Does say that.
Which year?
Tonight.
Yeah, what's the,
So the only mistake is the date.
Yes, sir.
I don't think it's fatal.
I'm sorry?
I don't think it's fatal either. I mean, Wednesday, August 2nd, there can only be one August 2nd, 2021.
Yeah, but if you're supposed to advertise date, time, and place, and we have I think the FOIA,
It's not a
FOIA council's
FOIA
always
issue.
ruled on something like that, hadn't they?
This would be a
2204.
2204 issue, not a FOIA issue.
But I'm, yeah, if you want to be super, I think it's almost like AM, PM. I mean, if you look at the calendar, there's only one August 2nd. I mean, that's one argument for it. The other is, okay, well, we're going to err on the side of caution and go ahead and re-advertise. So I'm thinking that we should be all right with the day of the week mistake.
and, I mean, and we know we are, the fact that we're having a board of supervisors meeting on Monday also, I mean, that's separately noticed to the public.
That was separately noticed at your organizational meeting when you had that in January, this date was picked. Were there other simultaneous ads, Gary, stating correct day of the week for today, a public hearing? I don't think so.
Yeah, there's the other public hearing.
Worth
See what it says.
equalization. Newspaper. August 2nd
Doesn't say a day of the week.
at 7 PM.
I should just do that.
Yeah.
Let me see, let me look at 204 real quick.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm in 2204 right now, so.
Good lord, that print is so small.
Good catch, Ron.
Yeah.
I should have seen that.
I didn't see it earlier.
And if there's a no-go, I need to reach out to the interpreter.
Right.
That's what I was thinking, because that would be
Yeah.
an extra expense for them, I guess.
Yeah, they're planning on being here, I imagine.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, we're paying for the interpreter.
We are.
Yeah, that's a law, ADA.
ADA.
And I'd say you probably have to cancel it.
I mean, I would rather err on the side of caution. And it might be an inconvenience to the applicant, but it's gonna be more of an inconvenience if there's an issue later.
One of the things, what you could do is you could hear the public hearing both times.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could use the procedure that we used, or what I used last time in recess. The notice shall specify the time and place of hearing at which persons affected may appear and present their views not less than 5 days, more than 21 days after the second advertisement appears in such newspaper.
And that would have been reviewed by Michelle and I, and we both missed it. And so the meeting before would have been probably, was
The
it
Wednesday
Wednesday?
meeting.
Yeah.
They just didn't
Oh, I
get
see.
changed back.
That's what happened. The reference to Wednesday got carried forward from the last time.
It's kind of esoteric to us. We know we meet the first Monday of the month, so we would read probably right past Wednesday. But somebody else may say Wednesday and never read the date.
Well, they would certainly read the date.
Plain language is silent on whether the day of the week has to be advertised. Let me read one case.
Yeah. Notice of report for here. Rendering the ordinance for that. There were 2 notices. That was properly done, correct?
What about?
Both notices would have had the
Both
same.
notices had the same mistake.
Well, I didn't look at.
I assume because it was just, they're just running the same ad.
If the proof says that, I'm pretty sure what was in the paper said that. Go look at the paper.
Should be somewhere we can blame this on Chuck.
No.
All right, well, y'all are not calling, I gotta tell you to take the safe route.
I think that's good advice, Art.
So I just, does the board want to just take it off the agenda, or do you want to?
They're planning on being here.
They are planning.
They're planning on being here. They're gonna show up.
And we've got a public hearing.
They're gonna be really disappointed if we say you gotta come back next week. But,
Well, you may have to say that anyway.
but I think that.
But we don't know where the interpreter's coming
I'd like
from.
to tell you something, everybody, I just don't think you ought to chase it.
I think the avoid ab initio
Because
concern is
the effect of
exactly
something
right.
like that is somebody could feel it the very day when you want it,
Right.
and they wouldn't want that.
Yeah.
So how could we make use of the fact that they're lined up for tonight? Could we,
I just open the public hearing and then recess it, so. you can
recess it to
re-advertise
September? Okay.
Re-advertise it and get, and remedy the mistake. And
Okay.
it's clearly a scrivener's error.
And that way,
Which will be Wednesday.
So are we gonna,
That's right, we just gotta keep.
are we gonna hear, people that show up to speak,
I'm saying, well,
citizens?
there's no reason that you can't open the public
Right,
hearing.
and let
Just
them-
continue.
And then continue it, okay.
Re-advertise, say, hey,
Right.
we made this
Because the
mistake,
ones that may
so.
be.
Are we gonna continue it or recess it?
Recess it.
That's the operative word.
According to your ordinance, continue means you never opened it.
Yeah, just continuing is not
Oh, I
what
see,
we want to
oh, I
do.
see. So you open it and
The
then.
memo that I sent.
We recess it, it'll still be going on.
Did you think that the
Okay,
word-
because how many people are gonna be here that are gonna speak?
You guys print it out.
To it, and they should be able to come next month.
All right,
Right, they can speak both.
All right,
good catch.
Good job.
so I have another, I should have called it off.
Well, actually,
Board, and that is to ask Mr. Goff to look into this thing about the, if the state of Virginia requires us to have an ordinance on
solar.
industrial solar fields. And because my opinion, if we can avoid that altogether, then we should do it.
In other words, I understood you were asking if we're legally precluded from imposing an outright ban on utility scale solar.
So what we've done is pass something that's squirrely, and if we can rescind that, and then if we're not required to allow solar fields anyway, then that's kind of, we can keep the county,
What you had before was a category for electrical generating facilities.
Right, so
And so that would include all electrical
right,
generating
so we could just
facilities.
take that out.
So the question is maybe
Yeah.
twofold. Can you prohibit solar?
Right.
Can you prohibit electrical generating facilities?
Right. Or prohibit both of them.
Or utility scale? You obviously have to, the code says you have to allow solar
Residential.
residential and
Right,
commercial.
yeah, which is a good thing,
Yeah.
which is a good thing, and that's gonna take care of everybody. But nobody wants to look at those.
I had an email from Mr. Parrish, and an email from Mr. Frazier asking me to do that, and I just asked to get one more person to say, set me on my way.
Sure.
I thought it was a good idea. I still do.
I second
all
the
do.
good idea.
Okay, so unanimous, you want me to do it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, thank you.
The only thing I had was, Mr. Curry shared with us the Gloucester explanation of voluntary proffers and rezoning considerations when we were talking about the Taylor property. They have a documentation that was used for the citizens, I believe, to clearly understand the use of proffers, voluntary proffers. And I think we should look at doing something Rappahannock County-wise as well for the citizens
Yeah,
of
that's
Rappahannock.
twofold. It also requires an applicant for rezoning to sign a statement that they understand the proffer policy and who can and can't suggest, and if proffers happen, that we didn't suggest it.
Has the county attorney and the zoning administrator reviewed those documents?
Oh, I think she's just saying that, do you want to have a policy? I don't think anybody's reviewed it yet.
Right, right.
I haven't seen.
I would say that we send them to the county attorney and the zoning administrator and ask them for their input.
Okay, I had one more thing, I had two things. I had told, I said it in an email that I would try to get with one or more supervisors in Culpeper County about their residents using our landfill, but then I realized that I was fixing to do something that I've been complaining about for other members doing, and may actually be in the process of negotiations or setting some sort of a policy with another county, and I haven't actually been instructed or authorized by this board to do so.
I think you should. I mean, I think it's a good opportunity.
I can meet with one or more because there's at least two districts that come up close to
Yeah.
Jackson District where the landfill is.
I encourage that kind of thing.
But
frankly.
I'd like to have the knowledge and support that the board is
For sure.
wanting to do something about it.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Do the research, yes, thank you.
Oh, I should have done this already, but I just kept putting it off, and then I realized I
You didn't-
probably,
You didn't want to be hypocritical.
yeah, I was fixing to be.
Okay. We would have been fine if you'd done it,
I
but
have a few items for discussion, but I'd like to loop back after the 7 o'clock items, if we could.
sure.
And finish up board discussion at that time.
And then are we going to go through the board reports and all that stuff?
I would think we should.
Yeah, I mean, treasurer's stuff is pretty
Then
important.
I would just make a motion that we move the remainder of the agenda, the 2 o'clock agenda, to the end of the 7 o'clock.
I'll second that motion.
It's basically all,
I and J.
yeah, I and J. Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
Do you want to grab a